Testing, testing. Dave, can you hear us? Dave Hoppick, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome to the Public Service Commission's administrative meeting for June 4th, 2025. First item of business is to approve the minutes from our meeting of May 28th, 2025. Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
Commissioner Sussman.
Aye.
Commissioner Barbe.
Aye.
I vote aye.
Morning, Mr. Chair. There is only one item on today's consent agenda, but first, I just wanted to mention that we will defer item 2 to the end of the agenda today. Item number 1 is a notice of transfer of ownership and control from Big Sky Wind.
Okay, I move that we note the filing. Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
Commissioner Sussman.
Aye.
Commissioner Barbe.
Aye.
I vote aye.
And items 3 through 5 all consist of revised tariff pages updating purchase of receivable rates from Washington Gas Light Company, Delmarva Power and Light Company, and Potomac Electric Power Company.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. Evan Thomas on behalf of staff. On April 30th, 2025, Washington Gas Light Company filed its annual update of purchase of receivables, or POR, discount rates, which enables utilities to recover their cost of providing POR. As explained in staff's written comments, Senate Bill 1 and Commission Order Number 9146 implement new restrictions on residential POR. Specifically, no new or renewed residential retail choice customers may enroll under POR after December 31st, 2024, and existing residential POR contracts may no longer use POR after December 31st, 2025. As originally filed, WGL proposed a residential POR discount rate of 4.3782%. After discussions with staff regarding the methodology used to calculate this rate, WGL revised its proposed residential discount rate to 6.4698%. The primary change was an adjustment to the forecasted commodity sales for third-party supply customers to better reflect the end of residential POR at the close of 2025 and the customer drops that have already occurred. Staff believes that the updated forecast of third-party commodity sales may still overestimate actual sales. However, as noted in our comments, using a more realistic forecast would yield a residential POR rate above 15%. The proposed rate attempts to balance recovering the outstanding POR costs and maintaining supplier participation through the end of the program, which would ultimately allow for more costs to be recovered through POR discount revenues. WGL's proposed non-residential POR discount rate remains at 0% and was set consistent with prior POR procedures. Regarding final residential POR reconciliation, WGL proposes to first file a residential POR uncollectible balance update by February 2026, to continue tracking related revenues and costs throughout 2026, and file a final reconciliation by March 2027. The company also proposes to recover any residential POR costs remaining after 2026 through the purchase gas charge, and to bill suppliers for outstanding uncollectible costs. Any recoveries from this direct billing to suppliers would be credited back to the purchase gas charge to avoid double collection. In its supplemental filing, WGL proposed tariff language changes to its supplier coordination tariff to specify that it will stop purchasing residential receivables after December 31st, 2025, that it will track residential POR costs by supplier through the end of 2026, and that it will make a final reconciliation filing in 2027. And also that any commission-approved unrecovered residential uncollectible costs will be directly billed to suppliers. But of note, the proposed tariff language does not mention WGL's proposal to place unrecovered POR costs in the purchase gas charge. I would just want to make one comment related to the Retail Energy Suppliers Association's comments. It's just a correction to a rate that they stated, just to correct the record. They stated that the average supplier rate as of April 2025 was 0.5582 per therm, or roughly 56 cents. However, WGL's May 23rd PC 67 filing states that the average third-party supply rate is or was 0.6779 cents or dollars per therm, so roughly 68 cents per therm. The same filing shows that the original figure cited by the Retail Energy Supply Association was in fact the 12-month default gas commodity rate and not the third-party supply average rate, and so I just want to correct that. And then staff, we want to note that the average third-party supply rate is approximately 19% greater than WGL's June 2025 default gas commodity rate, which is roughly 57 cents per therm. And so in conclusion, staff recommends that the Commission accept for filing the revised POR discount rates and accompanying tariff language from WGL's May 21st, 2025 supplemental filing. Staff also recommends that the Commission accept the proposed reconciliation reporting process and the company's proposal to directly bill suppliers for any outstanding residential POR costs following the company's final reconciliation filing in 2027. And staff, we recommend that the Commission defer any decision at this time on WGL's proposal to recover any uncollected residential POR balance through the purchase gas charge. Thank you, and we are available for questions. Oh, sorry.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Eric Delgado on behalf of staff. On May 9th, 2025, the Potomac Electric Power Company and the Delmarva Power and Light Company filed their annual update to electric purchase of receivables discount rates, which enable utilities to recover their POR-related costs. The SB1 in Order 91463 issues regarding the end of residential POR explained earlier apply to DPL and Pepco as well. As originally filed, DPL proposed a residential POR discount rate of 6.2589% for an effective date of July 1st, 2025. After a discussion with staff about the methodology used to calculate the rate, DPL revised its proposed residential POR rate discount to 6.1101% with an effective date of June 6, 2025 to allow the utility more time to recover uncollectible costs through POR. The revised rate also accounts for the decline in residential POR customers, which is now factored into the company's forecast. For Pepco, Pepco proposed a residential POR discount rate of 8.0768% for an effective date of July 1st, 2025. Similarly to DPL, Pepco provided staff with updated rates that account for the decline in residential customers in their forecast. However, the revised residential POR rate resulted in an even higher POR rate of 9.4510%. While the revised rate would better reflect the reality, staff is concerned that a POR rate of 9.4 would prompt a greater exodus of retail suppliers and counteractively lead to increased unrecovered POR costs in the future. In this case, staff recommends the Commission accept Pepco's proposed unrevised POR residential rate of 8.768% with an effective date of June 6, 2025. Staff is concerned about the magnitude and the increase of the residential POR discount rate. However, it is important to note that the proposed discount rate includes forecasted uncollectible costs through December 2026, since the utilities anticipate incurring uncollectible costs past the residential POR end date of December 31st, 2025. Thus, the additional year of uncollectible costs and shortened period for the utilities to recover uncollectible costs through POR results in a higher rate. As RESA notes in its filing, the utilities' June 1st SOS rates are below the most recent PC 67 average supplier rates for Pepco and DPL. Staff believes Pepco and DPL's rate is reasonable and set to minimize the final reconciliation. Pepco and DPL propose to file an update regarding electric residential POR balances through 2025 at a date no later than March 31st, 2026, and the final reconciliation filing after 2026 concludes by January 31st, 2027. The utilities propose to allocate any amounts due to suppliers or to be collected from suppliers based on each supplier's share of residential purchase receivables during the calendar year 2025. Staff supports the utilities' proposed reconciliation process. Regarding the utility supplier coordination tariff, staff recommends that Pepco and DPL add next to the residential POR rate an explanation that the rate ends December 31st, 2025, and an explanation on how the utilities propose residential final reconciliation. It is staff's understanding that the utilities are agreeable to adding this tariff language. Staff recommends that the Commission accept for filing DPL's and Pepco's proposed POR rates for Type 1, Type 2, and hourly customers. Staff recommends the Commission accept DPL's revised residential POR discount rate for an effective date of June 6, 2025, and accept Pepco's residential POR rate as filed for an effective date as June 6, 2025. Staff recommends that the Commission accept the proposed reconciliation reporting process and method to return or collect any final residential reconciliation under or over recovery. Staff recommends that the Commission direct the Pepco and DPL to file a revised supplier coordination tariff with the language proposed by staff. Thank you, and I'm available for any questions.
So, any questions for?
So, Chair Hoover, I apologies. I have a brief additional comments
Oh, I see.
regarding the OPC and RISA filings.
Okay, go ahead.
David Hoppick on behalf of staff regarding the OPC comments. Staff recommends that the Commission accept staff's proposed tariff language regarding final residential POR reconciliation for Delmarva and Pepco. Staff additionally acknowledges that the Commission deferred its decision on this same issue for the Potomac Edison and Baltimore Gas and Electric POR filings. Staff continues to believe it is important to explain the final residential POR reconciliation process in utility supplier coordination tariffs. Explaining the final reconciliation process in the supplier coordination tariffs will make clear the supplier responsibilities in the event of a final reconciliation under collection. Staff notes that OPC does not oppose the proposed WGL tariff language regarding residential POR final reconciliation. RISA also made comments on the final reconciliation process for Delmarva and Pepco. As explained in staff's comments, staff believes that the reconciliation process proposed by Delmarva and Pepco are reasonable and recommends acceptance of staff's proposed tariff language, which explains the final residential reconciliation process. Staff again acknowledges that the Commission has deferred its decision on this issue previously. Thank you. Staff is available for questions.
Okay, so now, any questions for Mr. Hoppick or anybody else from staff? All right, you're good? Okay, go ahead.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. Milan Tekle-Mikhail on behalf of the Maryland Office of People's Counsel. OPC partially supports staff's recommendation, but we do oppose staff's proposed revisions to DPL and Pepco's tariffs. Specifically, we oppose staff's recommendation to amend the tariff language to state any commission-approved under or over recovery will be returned or billed to suppliers based on each supplier's relative percentage of total 2025 residential POR purchase of receivables. It is the reason we did not oppose WGL's proposed tariff language is because it does not include that specific language or staff's revision to WGL's tariff language. It is OPC's position that adding such a language would preemptively establish how under or over recoveries are to be handled. This is not only contradicts staff's recommendation for the Commission to defer making a decision on whether final POR balances could be recovered through the SOS administrative charge, but it effectively bars a broader policy discussion on the issue of POR over recoveries. Now, OPC reaffirms the recommendation made last week when the Commission considered BGE and PE's respective proposed revisions to POR discount rates, which is to give full consideration to PE's proposal that if the final residential POR deferral balance reflects an over recovery as of December 31st, 2026, the excess funds should be used to help offset utility incurred costs associated with the development of the supplier coordination billing system. Now, utilities have expended significant resources to develop SCB, yet suppliers have failed to fully commit to the implementation of this billing system, prompting the Commission to suspend further work on this billing system. Therefore, it remains very unclear whether suppliers will ultimately participate in SCB at all. Regardless of their participation, though, residential customers are responsible for covering 100% of SCB development costs upfront. These costs were expected to be repaid over time through supplier bill fees. But now that suppliers have stopped participating in the SCB implementation, there's a real risk that ratepayers may end up bearing the full financial burden for a system that they might never benefit from. PE's proposal at least provides a reasonable way to mitigate that risk and recoup some costs for ratepayers. So OPC therefore recommends the Commission reject staff's proposed revision to the tariff language and instead defer action on the issue of POR under or over recoveries and solicit comments from interested parties on the proposal advanced by PE. Thank you, and I'm available for any questions.
So, any questions for OPC? Seeing none?
I
Oh, you?
yeah.
Oh,
I may
go
just
ahead.
have
Sure.
just one. Good morning.
Good morning.
Is it OPC's belief that the wrapping up of POR is going to result in additional funds that should be transferred or used under your proposal to pay for the UCB system development?
The SCB system?
I'm sorry, SCB,
No,
yeah.
it's fine. Now, our proposal is that there should be due consideration, meaning let's figure out what that looks like. And if there is a possibility that that over recovery could be used to offset some of the costs that residential ratepayers will be burdened with, and if that is a real possibility, then, get comments from other parties on their insights. And if it is a real possibility, then yes, if there are available funds that are over recovered, it should be used to offset that cost.
And so it doesn't. Is OPC concerned about the source of where those funds come from? I mean, what if it comes from a supplier who has a small number of customers, for example, but have a lot of that money out there?
Again, I would go back to our proposals just to get comments so that if there are those instances, what does that look like and what are the ramifications? Right now, we don't have enough information to say yes or no, and these are the ramifications because we don't have enough information to base any assessment on. But if parties do submit comments based on the utilities' expertise over how those over recoveries are begotten and also, what the supplier landscape right now looks like post SB1, then we would have substantive data to work from and make future assessments. But right now, we just don't have enough information.
Okay, so what would you propose if we adopted the proposal the OPC is offering? What would you have us do with the current tariff filings that are being made by the utilities?
The current filings should not be impacted because this is post, December 2025, where POR is essentially eliminated, and we won't know whether there is an over or under recovery, I believe, from the filings that the utilities made until 2026, maybe even into 2027. So the proposed tariff language that staff is proposing is actually very preemptive. It's just setting up, it's not a tariff language that needs to be in there in order for the POR discount rates to be effective. So it is OPC's position that the discount rates could go into effect for anything that is to happen from June 2025 until December 2025 without affecting the over or under recovery issue that is going to have to be handled well into 2026 and 2027.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anybody else? Okay. All right, so let me turn to the retail suppliers.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Brian Green for the Retail Energy Supply Association. We filed our comments Monday morning discussing two items. One is the level of the rates for the three utilities themselves, and then second is the process and the methodology for the final reconciliation. Let me start with the increases themselves, because unlike what we saw last week with BG and Potomac Edison, these increases are really high. We're talking about almost 100% for Washington Gas, about 181% for Delmarva, and over 200% for Pepco. And I realize this is a math equation. I don't have a solution, but we wanted the commission to know the results of implementing these kinds of high rates, which I don't believe we've ever seen before in the history of the Maryland POR residential programs. So just to explain, the retail contracts in the market today are fixed price contracts. They are not variable. All the variable contracts, the suppliers dropped those in January, February, pursuant to the order that came out in December. We can't change those prices. They're fixed price contracts. So if these dramatic increases cause those contracts to go underwater, which they will for many suppliers, that will increase the level of drops that are for customers that are out in the market today. And we've already seen over 104,000 drops since 2025 began. The other thing I would add is that suppliers can generally withstand the ebb and flow, the ups and downs of a POR discount rate, because they're bringing in new customers, customers are coming off of their contracts, and they can manage that risk. But when you have today where they're not enrolling new customers because it's not a competitive marketplace right now, and the rates are going up like this, there's really no easy solution for the suppliers. And I would also add that, and I appreciate staff's correction on the Washington Gas rates. I thought I had the most recent filing. Apparently, either I didn't or I misread it. But I appreciate staff's correction for the record. The purpose of why we wrote that is to show you that definitely on the electricity side, the average supplier rate right now and the current SOS rates are pretty much in line when you consider that there's probably a lot of 100% renewable contracts out there, and that these are fixed price contracts. There's not really a dramatic difference between what's in them. And I know for a fact that there are retail supply contracts out there today that are lower than SOS. So those customers will likely get dropped and face a rate increase. So I don't, again, this is a math problem. We don't offer a solution. We just want the commission to know what is, I want to say, likely to happen. I think what will definitely happen. So turning to the final reconciliation, as I said last week, RISA is not opposed to a final reconciliation where, as proposed by Washington Gas and Potomac Edison last week, because they track uncollectibles by supplier, which is extremely important when you wind down this program. And I understand that for Delmarva and Pepco and BGE, they haven't done that since the inception of the programs. They haven't been required to do it. But now we're talking about the end of the program. And so what we tried to explain in our comments filed on Monday is that we have the potential in an under-recovery state to lead to the way that staff and the PHI companies and BGE are proposing this, to lead to recoveries from specific suppliers in the market today that are totally unrelated to their actual uncollectibles. And so there's no cost causation element to this at all, and it will lead to a cross-subsidization as between suppliers. And I gave an example of a supplier A and a supplier B, where if there's a $200,000 under recovery, and supplier A has 40% of the KWH in retail sales, which is the staff and PHI methodology, that supplier would pay $80,000 towards that $200,000. But that supplier's customers may have paid in full all of 2025. They may not have contributed to this problem at all, but they're still going to have to pay in 40%. And so there's winners and losers, which is the very definition of cross-subsidization that the Commission for years has tried to avoid. So we wanted to spell that out. We think it's perfectly reasonable that if a supplier has uncollectibles and there's an under recovery, they get a bill. We think that's fine. Our proposal is that either Delmarva and Pepco and BGE be required to track by supplier, but to my knowledge, there's been no discussion about what that would entail for them to implement that program or upgrade technology or what that means. But we're talking about a rate that we won't even know what the revenue requirement is if there's an under recovery for 2 years. Nor will we know the level of the under recovery per utility, if there is one. So our thought is, why are we deciding this now? So for the 3 utilities and 4 if you count BGE gas, we propose either require them to track by supplier, or let's wait and see if they need to. There may not be an under recovery. It may be so small that no one cares. And in the event of an over recovery, we are at this point opposed to the commission saying, let's put it all towards SCB or some other program that is totally unrelated to the UCB residential POR program. And we talked about this last week. We've talked about it in the cost recovery hearing from the SCB proceeding and the order that came out coming up on 2 years ago in a few weeks. So we don't think that that's appropriate. And I would also add, just in closing, that the cost recovery order came out well before SB1. So the General Assembly is presumed to have known what the deal was with SCB and the cost recovery. And yet it went forward anyway. So our thought is right now that it's inappropriate to take any over-recovered funds and allocate them to anything other than the suppliers that actually paid into the program. That said, as I said last week, 2 years from now, if there's an over-recovery and a utility wants to submit a proposal to allocate those funds to somewhere other than the suppliers that paid into the program, they can do that, and we'll assess it at that time. But there's no reason to really go down that road right now. So that's all the comments I have. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
So, questions for Risa. Commissioner Sussman.
Morning, Mr. Green.
Good morning.
So I'm actually looking at last week's agenda, where I do see BG and PE presenting their proposed PR rates. Do you happen to have the discount rates that they were proposing from last week?
I do. Just need a moment. Okay.
Go ahead. If you could tell me those.
Sure.
Actually, if you could, so I like what you've done with the chart because it's nice and clear. If you can give me the for each their current rate and their proposed rate, which we accepted. So do you have
Sure.
those?
I do.
Okay. So
I do.
so go ahead. So you're
So I'm looking at my comments, the RISA comments filed last Tuesday.
okay.
On page 2, the BGE electricity rates residential, the current discount rate is 2.3921%, and that would go to 3.5685%.
3.5.
685%.
Okay. And for PE?
Okay. You want to go BGE gas, or we're not doing that?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
The
So first
right.
BG Electric and then BG Gas.
Okay, so also on page 2 of the RISA comments from last week, the current discount rate for residential, for residential, 3.3389%. And that will go to 4.0205%.
Okay.
And then I have Potomac Edison's, which
Yes.
is the current residential rate is, or was, 4.2722%, and the proposed rate was 0%.
Do you recall why it went to 0?
I mean, just in looking at it, I think they were likely in an over recovery, so it came out to negative, so they zeroed it out.
Okay.
I don't know. I just exhausted all my knowledge on.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it. Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Linton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning.
Morning.
At least for a portion of your comments, it sounded as though you were in agreement with the People's Council with regard to the idea that we wait and see what the impact are. Do we have an over recovery or an under recovery? Is that fair to say?
I think that's fair. There is a lot of overlap. I think we're probably more concerned about the under recovery, and
Right.
OPC is probably more concerned about what to do with any over recovery. But I think if you meld our two positions, I think they're pretty similar on that.
Okay. Well, then it's rare that these things happen, so I wanted to make sure I highlighted it. Thank you.
Although I would say that that is different when we talk about washing gas and Potomac Edison, because they are proposing to track by supplier.
Okay. All right. Well,
Right.
we won't lose the
I hear you.
momentum.
I hear you. I hear you.
All right. Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so actually, let me ask a question of staff. Given Reese's concern about the percentage increase for Pepco and Delmarva and also WGL from the current discount rate to the proposed rate, I mean, what's a reaction to that?
Dave.
Mr. Hopick, you want to respond?
Sure. So we specifically discussed this in our written comments, and they were addressed in the oral comments. For WGL, we did note, Mr. Thomas noted that June default gas rates are a fair amount below on a percentage wise than the month of April average rates we saw from the PC 67 filing. For DPL, staff recommended some revisions and worked with the company, and it did result in a lower rate. 6 is still a relatively high number, but it did go down. And again, PC 67 rates are higher than June SOS rates. And I think the challenge here is that if you don't set the rate high enough, you're going to have a sizable reconciliation to deal with. And then if you set the reconciliation rate too high, as we noted in our filing, it can drive suppliers from the market. So in the WGL comments, we specifically noted that the rate, if you tried to get the math to get the rate such that you were minimizing the reconciliation, assuming suppliers don't drop, would have been approximately 15%. The company recommended against that, and we supported that because we were concerned at that level. It would lead to kind of earlier excessive drops, and we had a similar logic for Pepco. I would note that we did reach out to and have a phone call with counsel for RISA and a representative for Vistra before we made the PHI and WGL filings. And one of the questions we asked is, is there a threshold, a percentage above which you believe that, will cause more suppliers to leave the system and thus be counterproductive in terms of setting a rate to minimize the final reconciliation. So we don't have an answer on that. So that was part of staff's challenge.
Okay. Commissioner Sussman.
Okay, so I guess I'm still not clear on why 1 week would make such a difference between last week and this week, because though the numbers are quite significant in terms of change. I mean, we've got the BG numbers, which look like a very small increase in the amount for the POR rate change, and then in a single week we've got Pepco, where we're looking at a 200% increase. So I'm not clear on why 1 week would make such a difference.
Understood. So the key is the ongoing reconciliation balance. So in the supplier coordination tariffs and in the worksheets, there's a constant reconciling of costs to date for residential POR as well as the individual commercial classes. And so the biggest difference across the utilities is kind of the current state of the net reconciliation as of the date of the filing. So for Potomac Edison, there was a net kind of current reconciliation over collection, and Potomac Edison until recently had a rate above 4, and that current reconciliation over collection was greater than the forecast uncollectible costs for the remainder of 2025 and 2026. So that's why we ended up with a 0% discount rate for Potomac Edison. For Baltimore Gas Electric, both for gas and electric, there was a net reconciliation over recovery, kind of as of the time of the filing for gas and electric. So there were tables in staff's comments where we laid this out, and if you look at those tables, I don't have them in front of me. You can see that the reconciliation reduced the rate proposed for BGE Electric and BGE Gas. For all three of the utilities today, WGL, Pepco, and Delmarva, the reconciliation balance as of the date of the filing was an under recovery. And in that instance, it makes the proposed POR rate go up. And this is consistent with how rates have always been set. In the past, we look at forecasts of uncollectibles, we look at forecasts of late fee revenues which offset uncollectibles, and then we also look at kind of the current recovery balance, the reconciliation. Are we over or under recovery on net? And so I think that's the largest driver, is what the ongoing balance is for each utility. And I think that's the biggest driver of the difference, for example, between BGE and Delmarva.
Okay, so that I understand, BGE is doing a better job at collecting than Pepco?
No, I would not characterize it as a better job of collecting. It's, the rates are always set for past costs with a forecast of what costs will be in the future. And the suppliers are paid the purchase receivables less the discount rate. So, the discount rates tend to be different utility to utility. We have different levels of shopping by utility. And it's just an accounting of what has happened to date of recorded POR costs for BGE, Delmarva, WGL, versus POR revenues, which are the late fee revenues and the POR discount rate revenues. So, the most recent POR rate for Potomac Edison was above 4, which is one of the higher rates we have seen. And the reason it went higher was in part because of an under recovery for reconciliation. And the rate was high, so there was a lot of revenue from the purchase receivables discount. So there's an ebb and flow to the reconciliation, and it's just tracking the utilities' expenses and POR revenues and the balance between those over time. And it's just kind of the state of where they are as of the date of the filing.
Okay, but right, I think I'm understanding. I guess the question is, at going up to 8% would represent a pretty significant haircut to the RISA community. Am I correct in that? That's
so.
That's going to
the 8% rate is a sizable
right.
jump.
Have we seen any increase that looks like this when we're looking at POR rates?
Historically, in Maryland, we have not seen rates this high, but also I think of POR previously kind of as a perpetual motion machine. We're always setting the rate to a forecast and then resetting it with a new forecast and a new
Right,
updated.
and that's okay
reconciliation
where
balance.
we have
The
a,
hard part
where,
is-
well, I understand that, but it's okay where we have a single percent change or less. But when we're doubling the POR rate, I'm still not clear on why that's justified. And I am concerned that this is going to knock out any incentive for staying in the market, because that's quite a haircut.
So, is there a specific additional question?
Probably not. All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Commissioner Linton. Okay, Commissioner Barbe.
Okay, let me ask the question this way. I realize that these calculations have a lot of variables. Identify for me the top two variables that are driving this increase.
So the top two variables are the forecast uncollectibles and then the current reconciliation balance. Another key, so I'm going to add a third variable.
Sure.
Apologies.
No, that's
is
fine.
Is the forecast of the billed POR revenues. So we have forecast expenses in the form of uncollectibles. We have forecast revenues in the form of late fees, which offset those uncollectibles. But then to come up with a rate, we have to divide by forecast purchase receivables, so sales, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that is a key element. And in both the WGL and Delmarva filings, staff noted it's work with the company on accounting for the drop in customers in the forecast of purchase receivables.
Let me follow up by asking something I should know the answer to this, but who does these forecasts?
So the utilities provided in their POR filings, staff certainly reviews them.
Uh-huh.
For all three in this instance, staff work with the utilities to refine the forecast, namely, especially looking at accounting for the decline we've seen in residential participation in retail choice, and specifically those billed through POR.
Let me follow up on a question that Commissioner Suchman asked. The fundamental crux of her question 2 questions ago was why have the forecasts changed so dramatically over such a short period of time? So let me ask that question. What's the fundamental underlying economic dynamic that's causing the forecast to change so quickly?
So I think there are 2 main parts, and one of those parts varies by utilities. So traditionally, we forecast uncollectible costs 12 months into the future. So if you looked at for example, the type 1, type 2 hourly commercial, there's approximation of uncollectible costs 12 months in the future. For residential, with the end of POR, right, we have the remainder of 2025, and then utilities, because of the delay in a customer not paying and that becoming an uncollectible cost, having uncollectible costs also in 2026. So I think you can think of it as we have 18 months of uncollectible costs with these filings versus in the past we had 12. And then the other thing is the current state of the reconciliation to date. And this is where you tend to have differences between the utilities. Was that helpful?
Yes, I think the explanation of the difference in forecast period from 12 to 18 months, you said, yes, that would definitely have a big impact. I do have to say, Mr. Chairman, that Ordinarily, I'd try not to get too far into the weeds of a calculation because that's why we have staff. But usually, I kind of have a comfort feeling about the analysis, and in this instance, Mr. Chairman, I simply don't, and it's a little off-putting to me. But anyway, thank you, Mr. Hoppick, for your answers. That's it for me for now.
Commissioner Schlesinger.
Yeah, so I have a follow-up on Commissioner Barfield. We could actually be here all day. Okay, so, if we look at the Pepco POR rate, the proposed rate of 8%, and it's in part based on a forecast of uncollectibles. Would the uncollectibles increase as a result of these high POR rates? Would one have anything to do with the other? So would we see an increase in uncollectibles because we've approved this higher increase in POR rates than is currently the case?
At a high level, no. These uncollectibles are customers failing to pay their bill, and the utilities not being able to recover some amount, and after a period of time that date's written off. The uncollectible, the POR rate is the discount on what the supplier is paid by the utility, which does not impact what is on the individual customer's bill.
Right, but what I'm asking, I understand that there are two different pots of money, but I'm concerned about a situation where we're making it much harder for these retail electric suppliers to be in business because we're paying them less and less, and so is there the possibility that could have an impact on their ability to perform, and then consequently the customer's ability or the willingness to pay? I mean, is is it possible that we're going to create a situation where the market's so precarious that customers are suffering as a result?
So, the OMAR, as we noted, allows and calls for full recovery for the utility for the costs of providing residential POR and all POR. If you have a high rate, and for example, in the WGL filing, both the company and staff noted, the rate, if you did the math, assuming suppliers don't care about the rate, would have been about 16%. Both staff and WGL said, that's likely to cause suppliers to exit the market early. So the concern in that instance was you'd be setting a rate to get an anticipated level of revenue, but you set the rate so high that fewer suppliers are participating, so you have lower purchase receivables. So the percentage of purchase receivables, that's staying constant, but the amount you're buying is going down. So the concern would be that the end reconciliation balance would be larger. So, we don't know what those end reconciliation balances will be. I think the goal of all parties is to hope to set rates to minimize that without suppliers deciding to leave the market en masse. For all utilities, there's a proposal to make themselves whole and in different manners, billing suppliers if there is an under collection.
No,
Staff does support.
I guess my question was, it's sort of the unintended consequences. So you establish a discount rate that's so high that it's going to cause all suppliers, certainly within the Pepco and Delmarva and perhaps the WGL regions, to leave the market. How is that going to affect existing customers, and could we see an increase in uncollectibles? And you don't have to answer that question. It's just I worry about the sort of a dramatic change in the way that things are done and how that's going to impact residential customers. And so I'm with Commissioner Barve. I'm just really worried about a rate that changes this dramatically, and how it could possibly affect the market. And I guess I don't really know where we go from here. Sorry, Mr. Chair.
No, that's fine. So
Chair.
actually, let me ask this question. I mean, if this was a traditional rate case, and these were the proposed rates to customers at these percentages, we would never approve anything like that. We would adopt, the principles of gradualism, all those sort of things. So why is this different from that situation?
So the rate is set to make the, to the best of our estimate, the utility whole. And we did explicitly not go with rates that were higher for the concern expressed about the rate being so high that a large quantity of suppliers would leave the market. And so, gradualism is generally the ability of a supplier, of a customer to react to a change in price. The POR rates do not directly impact the prices paid by the customer. It is the discount on the purchased receivables by the utility that ultimately gets paid to the customer's supplier. So, generally, gradualism is applied at a high level to protect customers, individual customers, be they residential or non-residential, from large changes in their bill. This does not directly change a customer's bill. A customer's bill is based on distribution rates and supply rates, be they SOS, default gas, or their retail choice rates. And this rate affects the amount the utilities pay the suppliers for their purchase receivables.
Okay. Mr. McAuliffe, go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Drew McAuliffe on behalf of staff. Just trying to respond to Commissioner Suchman's earlier line of questioning. Just to kind of complete the record and note some facts, and I believe Mr. Green kind of alluded to it, there really is no residential supply market at this point. They are not making any new offers. We received the complaints, I'll call them complaints, a lot from customers saying, I can't find any offers when I go to the website. I've been dropped. My suppliers tell me they no longer provide in Maryland. So your concern is valid about increase. I would say in normal circumstances, the increase in the POR rate would concern us that it could hurt the market and suppliers may not want to make offers, but there are no offers being made. So the only consequence would be they would drop customers sooner than the end of this year. They may drop them prior to December if the contract goes that long. But we're already seeing tens of thousands of customers be dropped per month. I believe BGE had over 20,000 drop in May. They had 12,000 dropped in April. So effectively, there is no the only retail supply market that is currently operating are the customers that currently have contracts that go through the end of this year. So if your concern is that suppliers won't make offers because of this PR rate, I could assure you they're not making offers right now in any of the service territories, for at least electric. I can speak confidently about that.
Okay, so basically what we'd be doing then is putting the nail in the coffin. If you're saying that then if we approve rates that are this high, then we would essentially be killing whatever was left, or the possibility of what was left. But I guess the question I have for you is and that too. This increase is to reflect the need to recover for uncollectibles from the utilities perspective. So if this were a lower amount, is the concern that the utilities will be unable to fully recover the uncollectibles by the end of the year? Is that some of what's driving that?
Sure. Yeah. So as Mr. Hoppick was trying to explain, there's just it's a delicate balance. Either we don't charge a high enough PO rate and we could have a very large uncollectible balance in 26, 27, or we charge too high a rate and they drop customers too soon, and we may not get any revenue this year. So yeah, it is a delicate balance. And as Mr. Hoppick alluded to, we didn't go with what I'll call the true rate should be for just say WGL and PHI companies. We did bring it in a little bit because we're trying to find that balance. It's impossible to know what that number is, where you can get the most revenue this year to make sure we have the lowest level of uncollectibles moving forward.
Right. So the only entity that really suffers in this are Mr. Green's clients, because you have this then very small window. You've got for whatever reason, Pepco is looking at a large amount of uncollectibles, and they're gonna just charge Mr. Green's clients. So that's
Not necessarily. I would just say if we can't get the uncollectible amounts from the suppliers, all distribution customers would have to foot that bill.
okay. So that's and that would be by the end of this year. So you're
No,
so
Yeah, no, may I interject?
Sure. Go ahead, Dave.
So thanks. So, if the rate is lower than the amount you need to recover the forecast cost, the reconciliation balance will be bigger. And all the utilities have proposed they're going to file something after 2025 is over, early 2026, to give us an update on where the reconciliation balance is. And then after 2026 concludes, they're going to make a final reconciliation filing. And that will tell us, what is the net balance for the utility? What is their net over or under collection? And then at that point, if there is an under collection, all utilities have proposed a method to then bill suppliers for their outstanding reconciliation balance. So the PHI companies and BGE proposed to allocate any under recovery billing based on the percent of purchase receivables in 2025 by supplier. Potomac Edison and WGL both track uncollectible costs by supplier, and they would use that to assign or allocate the outstanding uncollectible costs by supplier that then would be billed to suppliers. And so the reconciliation balance, if it's an under recovery, will be billed to suppliers. And this is part of why staff has emphasized putting the final reconciliation process into the supplier coordination tariff, because suppliers are bound by the tariff.
okay. So you're
And if, for example, a supplier, got the bill and tried to not pay, they would be in violation of the tariff. But if there's a reconciliation balance, it's going to be made whole between the utilities and the suppliers.
okay. So really you're looking to what you think the landscape will look like at the end of 2026, and you're basing these discount rates on what you think the landscape will look like in a year and a half from now.
Yeah, we're trying to set rates that try to minimize that reconciliation balance, with balancing that with the fact that, for example, for WGL, if you set the rate to minimize that balance and assume suppliers don't leave because of the rate, you end up with something like 16%.
Okay, so,
And
so for example, if,
Those said, I'm sorry.
okay, so,
Go ahead.
so if you have a supplier that didn't do their homework and signed up all these customers that had bad debt in the first place, and all of those customers, all of their customers represented the full scope of uncollectibles, you're assessing this charge against retail suppliers that could be they have done all of their homework and signed up customers that always paid their bills. You're treating all of the retail electric suppliers the same. They're all getting this discount rate regardless of how they did, and that kind of goes to Mr. Green's point about also looking to the individual suppliers as opposed to total outcome, because it sounds like in this scenario we are dealing with total outcome, and we're not looking to how each of the suppliers is doing. You're just sort of painting a brush on all suppliers and treating them all the same way. Doesn't seem very fair.
So there is
And maybe
one-
that's just the way it's set up.
There is one residential POR discount rate. There is not a means, and it was never set up, and there's not a way to do it before the end of 2025 to set a residential POR rate separately for each supplier. Additionally, when a customer has uncollectibles that are written off, that customer received a final bill, was disconnected, and then eventually, approximately 6, 7, 8 months later, those expenses are written off. If a supplier has a customer who later becomes an uncollectible cost, that customer will have gone through the process of being, receiving notice on late payments, receiving notice on potential disconnection, and then the customer being dropped, and then approximately 6 or 7 months later, those costs being written off as uncollectible. And POR was set up that way to socialize uncollectible costs, and
Well, also to socialize responsibility. I mean, it's not.
Yeah. So
it doesn't matter how good or noble you are as a retail electric supplier. Everybody gets painted the same way. So if there's one really bad apple and everybody else is doing okay, everybody is applied, the very high discount rate is applied to everybody because of one single bad apple.
So there is a uniform discount rate, as I said, across all suppliers.
Right.
For when we get to the final reconciliation, if there is an under recovery, and the hope is to set a rate to minimize that final reconciliation balance. There are kind of two methods put forth. There is the method put forth by Potomac Edison and WGL to take that unrecovered uncollectible costs and basically bill it to suppliers based on their tracked individual uncollectible costs, or to use the allocation based on the percent of purchase receivables in 2025. I certainly think it's true that there are suppliers with more customers that end up as uncollectibles later, and there are suppliers with less customers that end up with uncollectibles later. I don't think it's binary. There are some suppliers where none of their customers ever end up creating an uncollectible cost, and other suppliers that are only the source of the uncollectible
Right.
costs.
So if
There's a range therein.
Right. So Mr. Hoppick, since we have a year and a half before this ends, What would happen if we did nothing to
So
the POR rates right now?
So I think that's pretty much the worst outcome. So we have about 6.75 of a month left to collect a discount rate and on POR revenues, right? And so if for example the Pepco rate remains unchanged, we know that it is far too low to collect forecasted costs. So then you would be in a situation where you're pretty much ensuring that your final reconciliation and very likely a very large under recovery is going to come to pass because that rate was set last year in very different circumstances. So, it's very important to update the rates such that we get a rate that tries to put us in a good position for this final reconciliation, but we can only charge that rate through the remainder of 2025. However, utilities will continue to incur uncollectible costs in 2026. So, time is not on our side, unfortunately, and then, it is important to update the rates and to do it expeditiously.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're actually going to take this under advisement for a couple of reasons. One, I think we do want to sort of figure out if there's a way to ameliorate the proposed increase. But, I'm cognizant of this idea that we can't take forever to figure that out, so we'll do it promptly. The other thing is I would like to have Commissioner Richard have a chance to offer his thought on this. He's in the trenches today representing us at FERC, so I want to get his thoughts on this too, because it strikes me this is a fairly significant change in this, and we've been trying to sort of work our way through all the consequences of SB1, and so I just want to be careful in how we do that. So we're going to take items 3, 4, and 5 under advisement, and we will get something out relatively soon.
Mr. Chair, item number 6 is a request for a penalty waiver from Asbury Atlantic LLC.
Chair, Commissioners, Kenneth Albert on behalf of staff. We've got 5 items on this agenda, the next 5 items. I wanted to do a brief overview of the 5. Each of them have their own unique circumstances, so we did do separate buck sheets on each of them. Essentially boil down to the question of, did these customers make reasonable efforts to comply with the directive by the utility to stop taking gas off the utility system, given that they're interruptible customers. 2 of the customers are hospitals, one's a retirement community, one's a college, and one's a dairy. Four of those penalties are interruptible directives, violating the interruptible directive. One related where the customer failed 2 physical tests of its backup facilities that the customer tells the utility that the customer will rely on in order to comply with an interruption directive. These involve 2 different utilities, BGE and WGL. The buck sheets go into the specifics, but essentially it comes down to the fact is, did the customer make, again, reasonable efforts to comply? This burden is important because the gas utilities design their systems to serve firm load on that peak day. They design their systems expecting that the interruptible customers will comply with the interruption directive. That is, will stop using gas. Now, of course, the gas is there. There's nothing the utility can do to stop a customer from taking the gas. So this really is a situation of whether the customer complies by stopping its use of the gas that's flowing to its facility. The importance here, of course, is that the firm load is consists of high priority human needs. You've got roughly 1 million accounts in Maryland for residential gas. Those are all firm accounts. You've also got commercial and industrial. You've got, well, as in this instance, you've got hospitals, retirement communities that rely on this gas supply to provide heat and hot water to their residents. So again, that sort of underscores the need for the compliance by the customer with the interruption directive. Now, to sort of simplify, because again, we have the 5 different requests here. Essentially, they fall into 3 different buckets. One would be the customer is not at fault. We relied heavily on staff on an engineering analysis with extensive back and forth with each of the customers to understand what they did, specifically how they inspected and prepared their equipment. That is, in many instances, it was switching from a boiler that was, in some instances, a dual fuel boiler. It burned gas to create heat. They flip a switch. It now burns fuel oil. But the question becomes, are they properly inspecting and maintaining that facility? And in this first bucket of beyond control, I would put the Sinai Hospital situation, where its engineering staff determined that they did properly maintain their backup fuel system, but there was an unanticipated failure of the system that resulted in the hospital's inability to rely on the backup system that was on oil. The sort of middle ground here is where engineering determined that the customer was partly at fault. And in this bucket, we have the Perry Point Veterans Administration Hospital. They properly maintained their dual fuel oil and gas boilers, and indeed their backup equipment had significant redundant capacity. They had essentially a fairly significant cushion in case something didn't go wrong. But there were unanticipated problems when they received the interruption directive that prevented them from switching to oil. But there was would note there was a contributing factor that state engineering staff determined that the Perry staff did not have the requisite experience and skills to deal with this sudden shutoff of gas and relying on oil. And then the third bucket was, we would view it as where the customer really bears all or significantly all the blame. And in that we have the Asbury residential facility. Their oil boiler did not have adequate capacity to handle its heating load, a residential load, so it was a high priority in a case of a gas interruption. So regardless of what Asbury did, they would not be able to provide the backup service that they were required to be able to provide in order to be an interruptible customer. So those are essentially the 3 buckets. I would just throw in there, and something we did not address here, and my understanding is that has been addressed in the past, what is an appropriate type of load for interruptible service? Commission, again, we're not asking the commission to address it here, but it does beg the question. When you have an interruptible customer, that's a hospital or a residential facility, it does put them in a bind when it's a peak day like we did have this winter, and under the tariff they have to cut off the gas, but as a practical matter we know that it's likely they might not. And so it does beg the question, should we revisit what kind of load should be eligible for interruptible? And to state the obvious, interruptible service is significantly cheaper. There's a very strong incentive to opt for interruptible service. We do have the presentations on each of the 5 items. I don't know how the commissioners want to proceed here.
Well, actually, so let me just start with any overall questions for staff. Commissioner Barbe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I've been here for 2 years, and this is the first time I've seen this kind of thing. So I take it that this is these are unusual waiver requests, correct?
That's right. I think the last time we saw this is in 2019, and
Okay.
again, this does not happen often.
Okay. First time since COVID. All right. So given the fact that these customers have lower rates, I take it that the utility could, if a customer failed to comply with an interruption order, they could just bump them up to a firm rate and say we're not going to give you this interruption lower rate, correct?
That's my understanding, that indeed each of the utilities require the customer to, if at least on paper, to affirm on a regular basis, perhaps a yearly basis, that the customer has tested its backup equipment and determined that it's fully operational. So I'm assuming, and I can let the utilities respond there, if the customer cannot make that assurance, as far as the utility is concerned, that customer is no longer eligible to be an interruptible customer.
Well, okay, and you did sort of preempt a question I was going to ask about why, a hospital or an assisted living facility would even be eligible for such a thing. But I can understand that they would want to keep the cost of medicine low for their patients. So I suppose that's their motivation. But and then finally, I mean, in reading all of these, your calculations were there's no set philosophy on how to calculate a partial waiver. It's very much a case-by-case situation, isn't it?
Yes. I might add, I know this came up last time, these arose in 2019. In some instances, I suspect this is not frequent, the customer would say, we wanted to be firm. We went to the utility and said, we want to convert to firm service, and the utility said, we just do not have the delivery capacity. That is, our pipes cannot accommodate your load.
Okay.
So that is a situation. I don't know if that's the case here.
Okay, final question. Has there been an instance where a customer has complained to us about being moved from interruptible to firm?
I do not recall that happening with them. But again, the utility does have requirements. I would put it a little differently. The requirements to remain as an interruptible customer, and the duty to maintain the backup facilities so that you can serve your load. The understanding, of course, that especially in the situations here with essential human needs, they will be serving that load. It's a question of whether they can flip a switch on a boiler to go from gas to oil.
Okay, that's it for me so far. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair Schlesman.
Good morning, Mr. Albert. Talk to us about why there are interruptible rates. I mean, what's the theory behind having an interruptible rate?
Well, the interruptible service, you see that, both in the interstate market as well as the retail market. It's an efficient way of maximizing revenue for the utility, and flip side of that is reducing rates that firm customers pay. That is, these are customers that are willing to be on the system. They're willing to be on the system without that guarantee.
Right, but why have an interruptible rate? I mean, what is I think Mr. McAuliffe understands where I'm going.
The interruptible rate is really just an incentive to have customers. These are large customers, and if they can charge them, it's really a discounted rate, but then they don't have to worry and concern themselves with having enough supply for them during the peak periods. They can keep these customers because these are large customers. They're concerned they can find a different fuel supply. So it's
But
really
aren't they also worried about capacity constraints? So they're not going to have
yes.
to. So they're not going to have to build out pipes.
Right.
So that they don't have the issues around delivery, and it's gonna result in cheaper rates for everybody else.
Yes, of course. Yeah, that's one of the main selling points. That they won't have to worry about that peak day. They won't have to build out their
Okay.
facilities.
So it's important for a utility to be able to rely on interruptible customers to keep rates low. Now, if the utility encounters a situation where they're seeing constraints for whatever reason, it's a very hot day or a very cold day, and the interruptible customers decide to ignore the fact that they are interruptible customers, what could happen to the system at that point?
that'd probably be a better question for an engineer. But yes, we tried to stress
Is there
that.
an engineer in the room?
Yeah, we have Ms. Weber. But we
Yeah,
tried to
everybody
stress that-
stands up.
We tried to stress that in the buck sheet that this is very important that they do.
Right. No, and I appreciate you did, and I actually thought it was important to make the case for why this is so important and why it's a problem when interruptible customers ignore what they're supposed to be doing. So please.
Barb Weber with staff engineering. Most of the utilities have like peak shaving facilities that they use during times like extreme cold, like with propane or LNG that helps supply it. But that's limited, so it's
Right. So if they take advantage of those peak shaving opportunities and it's not enough, what will happen then?
You'll have customers out if too many interruptible customers fail to interrupt. Your delivery capacity will be limited.
Right. So firm customers will lose gas because interruptible customers are not following the rules. And that's the concern I have. You want to be an interruptible customer, you have to understand why you're doing this, and if you don't interrupt yourself, then you're putting the rest of the system at risk, and that's the concern I have, sort of going into hearing from the parties that are in play. But that's, and if you don't have the tools to stay an interruptible customer, you need to stop being an interruptible customer. So that's all I have.
Mr. Linton?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to the technical staff. I was looking at your confidential and non-confidential filings. I had a question. I wanted to make sure that what I was asking was not confidential. I don't think it is. How long has, we got 5 different companies that are customers that are requesting waivers of different kinds today. So I'm just going to start with the first one, item number 6 for Asbury Park. How long have they been an interruptible customer?
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. Again, Evan Thomas on behalf of staff. I don't know exactly how long they've been interrupted.
Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
but they, I believe a representative is here.
All right. Well, maybe I'll ask some of the questions to them. Thank you. That's all I would have for that, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Well, let me just, not so much a question as an observation. My father-in-law in Dallas, Texas, had his gas turned off for several days, electricity turned off for several days because several interruptible customers decided they wanted to continue to consume power, and it hurt a lot of ratepayers in the Dallas-Fort Worth area during, I think it was Winter Storm Uri, I think. So anyway.
Okay, let me focus first on item 6, because that's the only one that affects Washington Gas. And so I thought I heard you say that part of the problem was that the customer's alternate fuel system wasn't sufficient to actually provide the service that would be needed if they were called on to be interrupted. Is that correct?
That is correct. In asking questions to the customer, they stated that they did not have any mechanical failures and that the system could just not maintain adequate water and air temperatures, or their backup system could not maintain adequate water and air temperatures during the curtailment event, and as such, they decided to consume gas.
All right, so I guess my question then is, why were they allowed to be an interruptible customer? I mean, did WGL know that their system was inadequate to do this?
Not that I'm aware of. To be an interruptible customer with WGL, I believe you can certify that you're able to properly interrupt, and that part of that certification, though, I believe is a statement that you have adequate backup systems. And so if they provide that certification, at least as I understand it, that they're allowed to be on the interruptible schedule.
So I guess this is a question for WGL. I mean, how do you go about, I mean, do you verify this, or you just take their word for it?
Good morning, Commissioner. Spencer Nichols on behalf of Washington Gas. The company does take active measures to ensure this is an appropriate interruptible customer, but it does through the tariff, give customers the option of having greatly discounted rates with the assurance to Washington Gas that they do have adequate facilities in the event that an interruption is required. And that is part of this case. If there is a certification attached to Asbury Atlantic Senior Facilities request for waiver saying this plant can curtail its use of natural gas when notified by Washington Gas to interrupt. And it is quite clear that any obligation to follow any other regulations that are outside of this commission's jurisdiction, that's on the customer. It is, of course, not in anybody's interests, and we're certainly not interested in being at odds with any of our customers, especially a long-standing customer like Asbury, who's been a customer, an interruptible customer since 2010. The other thing I will note is that although our tariff, which is a little different than I think the other utilities tariffs in certain ways, doesn't require the company to require certifications or do inspections, Washington Gas does have an annual winter preparedness packet. It holds an annual open house, and it does have a certification requirement for all of its interruptible customers and all of that, just so they understand what their obligations are with respect to their obligations as being an interruptible customer. And in this case, we have had an inquiry from Asbury, and we have taken the initial internal step of ensuring that they can be switched to a firm customer, and we intend to reach out to them specifically to work with them to see what fits them best.
Okay. All right. So let me first turn to OPC. Do you have comments on this particular one, or just in general on the process?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Juliana Bell, Deputy People's Counsel, and with me is Diamond Hawkins, who's an Assistant People's Counsel. I don't think the full commission has met her before. She worked on these matters. She's a member of the D.C. Bar with her Maryland license pending and would be speaking with you if she were a member of the bar, but I'm in her stead. Just wanted to make a couple of overarching points, and they essentially echo what Commissioners Suchman and Barve have already pointed out, as well as Drew McAuliffe and staff counsel. And that is that it's important for policy reasons that interruptible customers, and important to residential customers, that interruptible customers don't treat their interruptible tariffs as mere suggestion. And for that reason, we think we generally support staff's approach to the various interruptible customers here. We're not taking a particular position on any of the fines, but we think in general that it merits fining customers in the instances staff has identified to protect the integrity of the interruptible gas system. And why is that? For the reasons Commissioner Suchman and Barve have already pointed out. It's a reliability issue for residential customers. If interruptible customers treat those tariffs as a suggestion, then there could be a failure to supply residential customers. The second overarching point is really a de minimis impact, admittedly, but there is a financial impact on residential customers when these fines are paid. BGE partially credits its penalty fees back to customers, including residential customers, and I believe WGL use penalty fees in part to reduce its procurement costs. So just wanted to make those overarching points about items 6 through 10, and appreciate your indulgence in letting us speak today.
Okay, so is there anybody here for Asbury Atlantic? Okay, go ahead.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. My name is Peter Smilowitz, and I'm the Energy Manager for Asbury Atlantic. One thing I did want to mention and clarify is the fact that Asbury, we do have the capability to curtail and switch from gas to oil, which we did do, and every year we do, as we mentioned before, we have a test with Washington Gas. I think the issue was that when the event occurred, we had a plan in place. We switched everything to oil, but at a certain point, our system couldn't keep up, and I think that was something that certainly is on us there. But we fully expected, we had good intentions, and we fully expected to comply with switching over to oil. And as the day went on, we realized our temperatures were dropping too much, so we had to supplement a little bit with our natural gas systems as well. But we did make a good faith effort, in my opinion, to solely use oil, and we were kind of our hand was forced, because with the temperatures dropping, we also have regulations for Maryland long-term care regulations for our senior living facilities. So at that point we had to switch over to gas. But I just wanted to be known that we had every intention on being on interruptible the whole time. And as we mentioned before, it had been, I think, since 2019, since an event had happened. So we really weren't expecting our system to not be able to keep up. And we did have our annual inspection with Washington Gas to confirm that we could switch. I believe that was in late October. We attached that confirmation there. But I just wanted to provide that background. That we did act in good faith. It wasn't like we planned on not complying with the interruptible order, and we did do our best to keep on oil as much as we can, and to use as minimal gas usage during that period.
So any questions, Commissioner Sussman?
Good morning. Thank you for being here and for explaining what happened. So you said that you used some gas to supplement. Do you have a sense of how much was used during the period of interruption?
The total, I believe, about 1,000 therms.
During the period.
During the 2-day period, correct.
Okay, so the interruption period was for 2 days. You used 1,000 therms, and how much would you have normally used if you had not been asked to curtail?
I'm not sure off the top of my head, to be honest with you.
Okay, that's actually kind of important. I mean, in terms of sort of an explanation of what was going on. I mean, I understand this was it must have been unusually cold, and you have requirements to maintain temperature for the residents. But if it reflected 90% of usage, that would be different than if it was 10 to 20% of usage, of normal usage.
Yeah, so our overall monthly bill that month was about $34,000 therms, and during our period, our penalty was right around 1,200 therms, but that's for over the month. So it's we don't have access to how much we use during the specific days. From our meter, usually on the bill it'll display the total for the month, so we might be able to figure. I'm not sure if Washington Gas would have that figure, but
Okay.
I don't have that really prepared.
But in those 2 days, you were using both your oil. You were using oil and supplementing it with natural gas.
Correct. Yes. So when the directive was given, we did switch to 100% fuel oil, and then so at 8:30 we turned off our natural gas systems, and at 8:45 we started our brine oil burning boiler, and by 12:45 we had to turn on one of our 3 boilers for domestic hot water. It's hard to say though. I don't even think we would have the data to see what percentage of what we were using.
Okay, but I think it's actually important to know that it wasn't that you were ignoring the order, that you were running into a
And that's the point I want to make too. And you know, in hindsight's 2020, obviously, and this hasn't happened since 2019. And
what had it happened before 2019?
I'm not sure, to be honest.
Okay.
I haven't been in this role for that long. But I did want to make sure that everybody knew that, you know, we fully intended on complying here. The test, I think, is important to note too. Our yearly test with Washington Gas was done in October. That confirmed we would be able to comply with the order, and our system is working. However, the heating load in October is a lot different than that January 20th and 21st, where it was colder than it's been in quite some time. So that's why we didn't even know that our system wouldn't be able to handle it until it came.
Okay, so but you actually so WGL came out, they did the test, and they certify it?
I know they signed off on it. I don't 100% know about the entire process, but I know that I'm pretty sure that they signed off on it, and I included that in the docket. In our attachments, that it was confirmed that our equipment would be able to switch to interruptible. There wasn't like a certain like sizing including in that, or like what this is what your capacity is as well. So I think that's kind of why it caught us by surprise.
Okay, and
welcome to the Washington Gas rep wants to.
Were you at all in contact with WGL to let them know that you were using gas during this period?
So right after it happened, we reached out, and that's why the rep said that we're already looking to see if, you know, what the process is to switch to the firm
When you say after it happened, during the 2-day period where you were using gas, did you reach out to WGL?
Yes.
Okay,
and to give them the heads up, and to try to figure out the way forward of, you know, because if we're not going to be able to do this, we're going to have to switch over to firm service. So we were just trying to get ahead of everything and give them a heads up as well.
Okay. Well, Mr. Chairman, it seems to me that I mean that Asbury acted in a responsible manner. They had the utility come out and inspect the equipment. An unusually cold day is kind of an act of God. And I think most importantly, you actually contacted the utility, so the utility was aware that you were not able to interrupt.
Correct.
So, all right, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I heard an answer to my earlier question, and I actually resulted in another question for the staff. Without giving up any information about the result, are you able to describe the process for calculating the penalty?
There is a formula. We're just trying to find it. It's in the tariff.
It's tariff-based formula.
Okay. I apologize. I don't have the page number specifically where it's located in the tariff. Or actually,
Well, I guess.
sorry. So this is under the interruptible delivery schedule, which is rate schedule number 4. And I believe in the overall PDF packet of the tariff, if you will, I believe it's page 31 of the PDF for people to follow along. And there's a section under the interruptible schedule titled Unauthorized Consumption of Gas and Overrun Penalty. And that section describes it. And so it says that WGL shall require customer to pay a penalty charge of $3 per therm used during the days of interruption for violating the penalty price. So it's an additional $3 per therm of gas used during the curtailment event. And then there is an additional part to it And the tariff just states that the customer, in addition to the penalty, the $3 therm penalty, the customer will additionally pay a charge or rate equal to either, just equal to the highest actual price paid during the interruption from a source from which actual purchases were made during the period of noncompliance. So the actual highest price that WGL paid for purchasing gas during the curtailment event, and then that is multiplied by a factor of 1.5. So it's $3 per therm plus the highest per therm rate that WGL purchased during their curtailment event, and that second part is multiplied by 1.5, and then you add those together and you get an additional per therm penalty charge.
Okay. All right, thank you. So now for Asbury Park. I'm sorry, Asbury Solomons. Asbury Park is an old place, long time ago. Were you familiar with the fining structure and what the risk was to the extent if you were to not honor the interruptible order?
We were aware that there was a fine. I didn't, know it off the top of my head, but yes, we were aware that that's how it works. If you don't interrupt, you're gonna pay a fine for that. So we were aware of that. Correct.
And were you aware of what the magnitude of it could be? Again, I'm not, without saying anything about what it is.
Somewhat, and to be honest, and even looking at the tariff, I've had a decent bit of experience looking at tariffs. I used to be more into rates, so I understood the $3 per therm, which clearly is a somewhat significant penalty. To be honest, I didn't understand the way that the second half of that was worded with the 1.5 times the Washington Gas's highest price, but I was aware that the fine would be pretty significant overall.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So your facility is a senior living facility, so all your customers are over 65, I guess?
Correct.
All right. And what have you done to make sure that this doesn't happen again? Because my understanding is that one of the charming things about climate change is even though overall winter may be warmer because the planet's getting warmer, these type of extreme events like polar vortexes are actually going to become, more happening more often. The problem is we have extremes in weather. So what have you done to make sure that you're not here next year with the next polar vortex with the same situation?
Exactly. So that's kind of why we're here playing through the process, and we already reached out to Washington Gas to see what as the representative stated, to see and get the process started to switching to firm, because you're absolutely right. I mean, these extreme weather events happen, and it definitely took us by surprise here. And for next year, our plan is to be a firm customer so that this doesn't happen again.
Okay.
Mr. Chair. Can I?
Sure.
I just wanted to respond to what the company said earlier. Drew McAuliffe again on behalf of staff. So first of all, the test is just to ensure you can switch fuels. It's not to ensure you have adequate capacity or it can run for 5 days. And the excuse that it was very cold is a non-excuse. That is the reason we have interruptible rates, and there's only going to be an interruption called when it is very cold. So the fact that the customer did not have, this was, I believe, the only customer we gave the full fine to, because they did not have, it's completely in the customer's control, they did not have adequate capacity to serve during a very cold day, which is the point of interruptible rates. So I just really wanted to hammer that home, that is the last excuse to make, because that is precisely why we have these rates.
Yep. And if I may, to just very briefly to correct one point, Washington Gas does not send a technician out to the site to actually confirm that the equipment has capacity. And we echo staff's comments as well, that the certification itself doesn't say you have capacity on October, whatever day in October. It's for capacity for the entire winter.
Right. No, I understand that part. So.
And I want to clarify, I wasn't trying to, say anything incorrect. I did think I saw that Washington Gas, there was something on the certification, but I did say before to clarify that when that is signed off on that we can switch to interruptible, there is no capacity. There's nothing that talks about capacity on that. So I didn't want anybody to think I said that sufficed for our capacity. It just didn't mention it at all. So I just wanted to clarify that. And another thing I wanted to point to was in the tariff, it does state, and really one of the main reasons why that we even filed this waiver, aside from trying to make this a learning process for us, but the tariff does state, and this is stated in the analysis on page number 5, that a customer that requests a waiver of an interruptible penalty must demonstrate that, number 1, its backup equipment was properly maintained, which we submitted info that our equipment is maintained quarterly and tested annually for interruption capability, which we also supplied that it does have the capability to switch, albeit there's nothing that mentions the capacity of the equipment. And number 2, the customer made a good faith effort to comply with the interruption directive, and that's what we saw in the tariff, which is why we thought it may make sense to file a waiver, because we thought that we did act in good faith. This wasn't something that we thought we were going to be able to maintain our load, and unfortunately it didn't work out that way, and we're here now. So I just did want to bring up those points.
Okay, so I guess one of the things I'm concerned about is, since we're broadcasting this and some of this is confidential, theoretically, if we cut the penalty in half, do we need to go on the record about what that amount's going to be, or?
I believe you could just say you recommend 50% of the penalty.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, we have no objection to the amount of penalty being confidential.
Oh, okay.
Or to not being confidential.
Right,
but
yeah,
to being
okay.
public.
That's fine.
It's
So,
no
all right, well, with that, I move that we reduce the penalty imposed on Ashbury Atlantic LLC by 50% for the violation of WGL's directive that Ashbury cease taking delivery of gas from WGL during an interruption event that WGL declared on January 20 through 21, 2025. Commissioner Linton.
Mr. Chairman, I'm voting affirmatively, yes.
Okay.
And with the understanding that the company is moving to firm service, or at least intends to do so.
Okay. Commissioner Sushman.
And I'm also voting yes, and with that same assumption, you need to be on firm. Thank you.
Commissioner Barbe.
Apparently, great minds think alike. Ditto that. I vote aye, and in the anticipation that they go to firm service.
I vote aye. Okay, so the next 4 are all BG&E, right?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, okay. So why don't we do this? The representative from BG&E, why don't you come to the table, because you probably get lots and lots of questions, and so we won't have people jump up and down to the podium. So, and I guess we'll start with you. So, do you want to deal with Sinai first, or?
Your Honor, before we get to the specific customers, it might be helpful if I just give kind of maybe some broad comments and to request.
Well, actually, why don't we do this? Let me start with staff, then I'll go to you,
Okay.
and then you can make your
Okay.
overarching comments.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Cameron Walton on behalf of staff. On March 21st, 2025, Sinai Hospital of Baltimore filed its request to waive an interruption penalty fee assessed by Baltimore Gas and Electric Company. On Friday, January 17th, 2025, BGE provided notice to all Schedule IS customers of the need for a gas distribution interruption starting at 10 a.m. on Monday, January 20th, 2025, and ending at 10 a.m. on Thursday, January 23rd, 2025. An interruption of the distribution system may be called when BGE is running peak shaving facilities or anticipates conditions near an upper limit of its resources. An interruption of the scheduled IS customers allows BGE to reduce the anticipated demand while IS customers access other avenues for energy. As an IS customer, Sinai was required to reduce their gas consumption to zero during the interruption period, but failed to do so for 8 of the 72 hours. This was due to the unexpected mechanical failure of their fuel oil system. BGE's tariff for IS customers, paragraph 3.4b, states the Public Service Commission may reduce or waive entirely the distribution interruption penalty for a customer who demonstrated a good faith effort to interrupt gas usage. The demonstration of a good faith effort shall include 1. Efforts made prior to the interruption to be fully compliant. 2. The reason why full compliance was not attained, such as sudden failure of alternative fuel equipment. 3. Efforts to correct non-compliance during the interruption. And 4. Customer actions after the interruption to be fully compliant in the future. Sinai experienced minor unexpected parts failures at the start of the curtailment period. However, hospital staff acted in good faith to promptly repair and restore operation on fuel oil. Prior to interruption, Sinai passed the physical interruption test in November 2024, and the hospital monitors fuel oil levels daily. During the interruption, Sinai's maintenance team diagnosed the problems, ordered the necessary parts, and fixed the failed components to operate on fuel oil. For future compliance, Sinai states that it will fully upgrade its fuel oil delivery system by replacing all necessary parts. In addition, 2 physical interruption tests will be performed per year for preventive maintenance. The Engineering Division has also reviewed the filing and determined that significant reduction or elimination of the penalty would be appropriate, considering the minor and unexpected nature of the mechanical failures and the hospital's swift action to restore operation on fuel oil for the remaining 64 out of 72 hours of the curtailment period. Based on the good faith efforts made by Sinai Hospital prior to, during, and after the interruption event, staff believes it is reasonable to grant Sinai's request to waive the interruption penalty. Thank you, and I'm available for any questions.
Any questions for staff? Okay, so.
Good morning, Chairman Hoover, Commissioners, Beverly Socron. Oh,
Yeah. hold on.
Beverly
Okay,
Socron.
Is it on, actually? Is the light on?
Lights on.
Okay. then
Okay.
You're good.
Beverly Socron on behalf of BGE. Just stepping back, as we were saying, we design our gas system to serve firm customers on a peak day, which I don't remember the exact technical specifics, but it's something that's not going to happen rarely or happen frequently, and it also can depend on when it happens, weekends, weekdays, holidays. So, there is generally, and then think about the summer, we have excess capacity. So, again, to benefit all customers, we offer interruptible service to get additional revenues that will offset the costs of firm customers. For as long as I've been around, which is going on 25 years, we have offered this up, and we have had no restrictions on who can sign up. It's really a cost-benefit analysis and a operational decision for the customers, whether they, can meet the requirements. I'll say, we talked about the price that the customers pay when they're uninterruptible. It's often not just that price that goes into a calculation. If a customer wants firm service, we might not have capacity to serve them at a firm load. And so they will have to have a service extension. And having a service extension would require, us looking as we normally would, at how much it would cost. And, sometimes it's not even as simple as just running a line from our main to their pipe or to their facility. There could be significant upgrades. So, often that is, I think, more of a factor in, someone not going firm. But again, it's, that's a decision that we have left to the customers. I will say BGE, for at least the last 10 to 15 years has been very proactive with communicating with the customers. In, I want to say it was the 2010 timeframe, we completely revamped our process for testing to make sure that customers have the capability to interrupt. Again, kind of like was said, it's not a, how long, how much, that it's, do you have the processes and the physical capability to interrupt when we call on you? As someone said, that we do, I think, ours in October as well, our tests. It's not the same conditions, but it's the best we can do. We're not going to do a test in the middle of January. That obviously isn't going to work. So it is the best that we can to try and figure it out. But we have been steadfast in sending reminders. BGE also even offers I can't remember the acronym for it. We do have the ability, like if an interruptible customer says, you know what, I need just a little itty bitty bit to keep my pilot lights going, we do offer customers that ability to say, hey, I still want to be interruptible, but I want like this little bit firm so that, I don't, completely shut my systems off. I need this for pilot light or for whatever else reason. So they have that ability to kind of have a quasi interruptible firm service. Again, all subject to us being able to handle that firm load, but, it is another option. So we have really, gone through great lengths to make sure that this works as best as possible, and including, having the tests and that. One thing that got said, if someone interrupts or doesn't interrupt, it can cause, grave, problems with the system, causing everybody else to go out. If there was an extreme enough situation, we might send somebody, or we probably would send somebody out with a wrench, I'm understating it, to see if we could find a valve to shut off, if we really thought that that might help. I've 25 years never had to see that happen, but, it is something that, is always in the back of our mind that we could try. Talking about what customers would do at this point, we always do tell them, and it's in the tariff, that, hey, when you fail, you need to be looking at what you really should be doing going forward. Come to us, ask if we have firm, the ability to give you firm service. Look at your other options. Going to a system that doesn't involve gas at all. Going electric. Is that physically possible? It's not happened, but our tariff does give us the ability that if a customer fails an interruption, I'm trying to think if it's twice in 36 months or 3 times in 2 years, but there is a provision where if that customer fails and is not making an attempt to do anything else, we can come to this commission and ask you to allow us to terminate gas service to that customer, because clearly they have shown that they, can't interrupt and are not doing other things to, remediate the situation. So that is something that we do have in our tariff that, is an option. So that's my spiel to start.
Okay, any questions for BG&E? Commissioner Barbie.
Okay, so we're talking about a hospital here. There is no scenario where you would, terminate service in a situation like this, is there? I mean,
probably not, no, but it's out there. I don't know. If that hospital would cause other hospitals to go out, if that hospital would cause, I'm not an engineer. I don't know our system. I don't know if it was that extreme. But, if one hospital was going to cause 100,000 customers to go out and potentially other hospitals to go out, I can't say. I certainly think that, the threat that discussion would be happening, between the utility and the hospital itself about what would be happening.
oh, okay. I take it that in your company there is not a discussion that goes along the lines of, we're not going to allow this hospital or nursing home or assisted living facility to be on interruptible service because it just wouldn't make any sense for them. I mean, the impression I get is that the policy of your company is to say, it's really the call of the customer. Am I right about that?
I gotta take this in 2 parts, because I think currently, if we had, all the customers that are here today have been interruptible for at least 20 years.
Okay.
I think if we had a customer coming us today saying, we want to be interruptible, we would really be, I don't know that we'd be saying no, but we would be encouraging them not to. We would be explaining the risks and, hey, here's some experience that we've had. I think our customer reps and all those people would be doing everything they could to show that this really isn't the best, option. And even to be honest with the state of our system, I don't think even sometimes if you want to be an interruptible customer, that doesn't even necessarily mean that you're not going to have an extension charge. So, I think at that point it becomes an economic, but we are really, and going firm may not be that much more expensive than adding incremental enough to handle the interruptible load. But I think today we absolutely 100% would be saying, you know what, we may not be saying no, but we're going to encourage you not to do this. And I honestly, I haven't looked at the data, but I don't think we have added that many interruptible customers over the recent years. And if they have, I suspect they've been more industrial manufacturing type facilities.
Yeah, I mean, in the example I gave of her, it was actually my father-in-law's gas service that was interrupted. In the Dallas-Fort Worth area, there were a couple of very large manufacturers who said, fine, we'll pay the higher rate. Corporate wants us to stay open. And as a result, hundreds of thousands of people didn't have gas service. Are you at all, is it concerning to you at all that if we give these waivers, we're sending a message to all of your customers that maybe becoming interruptible is a good strategy for saving money because, when push comes to shove, we can just go to the Public Service Commission and ask for a waiver?
I don't know that it's going to be for new customers like, hey, let's switch. But I do think it does, it could be a signal to existing interruptible customers that, hey, maybe we don't need to be as
don't need to be firm anymore.
Well, I can't think that there have been also in my recent years, I don't think we've had many customers come to us and say, I don't want to be firm anymore because I'm going to do the math and it's going to be cheaper to be interruptible, or it's going to be a better deal for me. I just don't think that's really happening. My concern would be more with the current interruptible customers. It's sending a signal that, I'm not going to be quite as worried about how steadfast I am in making sure that I have the processes and the capability to switch. Because if I do get penalized, I will go to the commission.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Fleischman.
Afternoon. Good afternoon, Ms. Sikora. Do you have a sense of what the sort of general percentage of hospitals that you serve are on an interruptible rate?
I think we asked a data request. No, we didn't ask a data request. We got something more about college facilities. But no, I don't know. I don't have that.
Because it just seems to be sort of following up from Commissioner Barvey's questions. This is like an accident waiting to happen. I mean, it makes, for the life of me, I can't figure out why you would ever want a hospital to be on an interruptible rate during a weather emergency. I mean, and they have backup generators that they have to have,
right.
Because there are times when the system goes out. So basically they're relying on these backup generators. And what if the generators go out? I mean, it makes absolutely no sense. And it's kind of inevitable that we're going to be seeing them, and we'll get to you in a minute, but that we're going to be seeing, more and more to the chair's point, this is, climate change is real. We're going to start to see more extreme situations. And I understand, the value. I mean, you've heard me talk about load management and trying to find ways of flattening load. But it may be that interruptibles for customers that really cannot ever have interruptions for whatever reason is just an accident waiting to happen.
I'll say personally, I don't disagree. And, again, this goes back decades, and I can't speak to why decisions were made in the past. I think now it just becomes a very difficult conversation, to these customers, because again, it's not just the change in the price that they pay monthly. It is the, likelihood that we don't have the capacity to serve them at a firm load, and so that they're going to have to get firm service, they're going to have to pay for an extension.
Or they will take firm service because they're a hospital. They will take firm service away from another customer that is a firm service customer, who opted to stay on firm service. But when you're dealing with life and death issues, the hospital is always going to have to get served.
Yeah.
So, okay, that's all I have.
Oh, I forgot to add one thing. Okay, I'm just having all sorts of, OPC made the comment about BG crediting back some of the penalty revenues. We actually don't keep any of the penalty revenues. They all go back, 100% goes back to
Right.
customers.
No, we understand that, so.
Okay.
Commissioner Litton? All right, so let me turn to Sinai Hospital. And, yeah, so go ahead and make any comments you want to make based on what you've heard so far, so.
Good afternoon. James Roberge with LifeBridge Health. Thank you for having us. To answer your earlier question, one of the reasons why we can be uninterruptible is because we're designed to have backup systems for all of our major utilities. And so where there are people who cannot have a backup system, we have that capability, and it's really important for us to have that capability. So if we do lose gas, we have the diesel fuel ability to burn and so forth. So having dual fuel boilers is a necessary part of our business. The rigorous testing around our emergency generators, we frequently test those units and so forth. So redundancy is a really important part of our business to maintain our facilities. On that day especially, there were 708 patients in our building, both in the emergency room and our cath labs and the surgery tables, and of course in our inpatient rooms. And so, as you heard in the case, we had tested the system earlier. When we went live, we had some malfunctions in the system, and then after repairing one malfunction, we had a second malfunction. So it was about an 8-hour window of time where we had to use natural gas in that case as temperatures are dropping and so forth. But having a dual fuel system is really important because the reliability of the natural gas is always in question just as much as potentially a fuel system. So we always have to have a backup for all these key utility systems, if that makes any sense.
Well, except that you needed triple redundancy, and that's
Correct.
and so again, that kind of goes to my point. Should you ever be an interruptible customer? I mean, you're interrupted, so then you're relying on a backup system. But if the backup system goes down, what happens to your hospital?
Sure. Yeah. We have a number of steps we take during certain circumstances to get systems back up and running, whether it's shutting down air handling systems and so
Yes,
forth.
but
Yeah.
you had to go back to the gas that you weren't
Yes.
supposed to take.
Correct.
And that goes to my point of why is a hospital an interruptible customer? I mean, here you had a situation where your backup system failed, and so you went back to take the gas you shouldn't have. Now I understand that staff is recommending that we waive the penalty, but for the life of me, I don't understand how a hospital can be on an interruptible rate. Anyway.
Yeah, and I understand that. And we also, 5 hospitals within the system, all 5 went on the interruptible process, and one of those 5 did have a failure. And I've been with LifeBridge Health Sinai for over 10 years, and we've never had this situation in our past. We're always compliant. We provide preventative maintenance and so forth. This was a very odd mechanical error, glitch in the system where a regulator failed and then a pump coupling broke on us. So it was a very, very abnormal situation. And we've upgraded now all of that equipment, and we'll be doing preventative maintenance more often than we had in the past to make sure that these kinds of things don't happen in the future.
Anything else? Commissioner? So, who sets the requirements of anybody for these backup systems you have to have? I mean, you get I know you have like licensing requirements from other state.
Yeah, Joint
And-
Commissions, Joint Commissions, it is a surveyor company that works under CMS, is a subcontractor to CMS. So CMS drives many of the guidelines for us when it comes to backup systems. We have this, what they call 96-hour rule, in which we have to maintain operations or systems for over 96 hours, or have a plan at least if in fact we have a major failure, whether it's IT, utility, and so forth, to maintain operations. The FGI guidelines, there's a number of air handling system guidelines, energy conservation, there's a number of guidelines that we're NFPA, et cetera, that we comply with on a regular basis.
Okay. Alrighty, sounds good. All right, well, I guess on item 7, I move that we grant Sinai Hospital of Baltimore a waiver for the penalty imposed by the Baltimore Gas and Electric Company. Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
Commissioner Sussman.
Aye.
Commissioner Barbe.
Aye.
I vote aye. Okay, now we'll move to Notre Dame of Maryland. Actually, let me start with him first.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. Alden Manka on behalf of staff. On March 25th, 2025, Notre Dame of Maryland University filed a request for a waiver of the commodity and distribution penalty imposed by BGE due to NDMU's failure to stop gas use after receiving notice of an interruption from BGE. Section 3.4A of BGE's Interruptible Small Volume Service Tariff. BGE directed customers to cease gas use from January 20th, 2025 through January 23rd, 2025. Due to issues with some of NDMU's boilers, NDMU was not able to interrupt gas use for the entire length of the interruption, and thus was imposed a penalty for improper gas use. Section 3.4B of BGE's ISS tariff provides an option for a customer to ask the Commission for a waiver of the penalty if the customer can show a good faith effort was made to interrupt gas use. Staff believes that NDMU did make a good faith effort to interrupt or to come into compliance once it did fail to interrupt. However, staff believes that not enough was done prior to the interruption to warrant a full waiver of the penalty. Therefore, in this case, a partial waiver is appropriate, as while NDMU could have made more efforts prior to the failed interruption, once it did fail to interrupt, it did quickly take action to come into compliance with BGE's gas use directive. Therefore, staff recommends the Commission grant a partial waiver of $67,740 for NDMU, which is a 50% reduction. Thank you, and I am available for questions.
Okay, seeing none.
Alrighty. Good morning, hearing committee, BGE representatives, and those that are in attendance. My name is Reginald Watkins. I am the facility director for Notre Dame of Maryland University. I was newly appointed to this position in July of last year. I am sure if many of you are familiar with our campus, but it sits on 60 acres of land. I am not sure if many of you are familiar with our power plant, but it services our whole campus as well. Upon my arrival, I was to find out that our central heating and cooling water, our central plant sent heating and cooling water to tributaries that service the rest of the buildings through an intricate tunnel system and other channels of delivery. I had seen this at Georgetown University years ago. December the 10th, 2024, NDM successfully passed the interruptible gas test with no problems. I personally set up a mock gas interruption a week before then and contacted BG&E to ensure that we would be in compliance for the December the 10th test. BG&E official Calvin Little sent results to show that 0% gas usage had been used. The gas interruptible was new to me, and I quickly learned the process. During the scheduled January 2025 gas interruption, which coincided with the inauguration day and birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King, myself and our other former operational manager were on site for the switch over to oil. We had previously tested the boilers, number 1 and number 2, a week prior to make sure that there was no problems, and they both fired up. We were prepared for the real test the following week, but that test failed. For the next 2.5 hours. We did everything in our power and mechanical minds to get up at least one boiler, get one boiler up. After that, as you read in our timeline statement, that we called our contractor, Tate Engineers, to send an emergency crew as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, this was a severely cold time, and most of their workers were assisting other customers who were interrupted as well. So I stand before you as a humble employee who gives my all to Notre Dame and only ask that the board recommendation is more than fair, but if you see fit in giving us better, we will greatly appreciate it. I just want to add 2 notes. We had just gotten all our certification for our boilers at the end of 2024 from the city of Baltimore City. Since then, I've come on board. What we've also done is make sure we switch over to oil twice a month now on a regular scheduled basis, just so that we can make sure any other mechanical things, if something, we can catch it earlier than the interruption. And even though we understand that these are done in the cold months, we know that unless you're doing it on a regular basis, like with any type of preventive maintenance, you never know when those situations are going to happen, and they always seem to happen at the worst moments. So thank you all for your attention.
Okay, so any questions for? Oh, okay, Commissioner Barvey.
Actually, not so much a question as a comment that I don't hold the employees of an organization responsible for bad business decisions that are made by management, and I don't, regardless of how I vote, I don't think that you are responsible for as an individual. I think that systems have to be held accountable for the decisions they make.
Okay, I'm sorry. This is my vice president.
Oh, I see, okay.
No, really, thank you, thank you, Reginald, and thank you, Commissioner, for obviously entertaining this response and so forth. But just to reiterate all the steps that Reginald mentioned before, we thought we were really prepared for this curtailment issue that started on Monday at 10 o'clock in the morning. As we switched things over, we noticed things were going sideways. We reacted as fast as we could. We did have 400 plus students living on our campus at that time, first week of school. We also had other classes for commuters coming in as well. But we held out as long as we could until about 5 p.m. that day on Monday. At that point, we just said we have to switch over. There was just nothing we could do at that point. From a safety standpoint, we switched over to gas, got temperatures back up. Tate Engineering, our engineer of record, was essentially on site from 12 o'clock that Monday through the end of the curtailment. We didn't let them leave. So they were basically set up tents there and established themselves to help us mitigate and start flipping equipment from one boiler to the other to try and get 2 boilers up and running, because you need a lead and a lag to make it work. And we got that functioning by about 3 o'clock the next day, 4 o'clock on the Tuesday, and at that point we were fine through the rest of the time frame. So we made the best efforts we could. We thought we were prepared, but once again, perfect storm just worked against us.
So,
I'll
any
stop
other
at that.
questions? Okay, so regarding item 8, I move that we grant Notre Dame of Maryland University a partial waiver by reducing the interruption penalty by 50%. Commissioner Linton,
Aye.
Commissioner Sussman,
Aye.
Commissioner Barvey.
Aye.
I vote aye. Ready? So,
Good morning once again, Chair and Commissioners. Alden Manka on behalf of staff. On January 29, 2025, Cloverland Farms Dairy filed a request of the commodity and distribution penalties imposed on Cloverland by BGE. Section 3.4A of BGE's interruptible small volume tariff outlines the penalties to be imposed on a customer who does not stop using gas after receiving a directive from BGE instructing that customer to do so. Additionally, Section 3.5 of BGE's ISS tariff outlines the requirement that every year a customer must either get their system's interruption capability certified by a professional engineer or pass a physical interruption test. If a customer fails 2 physical interruption tests in the same heating season, the customer will incur penalties as if that customer had failed to interrupt, as described in Section 3.4A of BGE's ISS tariff. These penalties will continue until the customer either provides a professional engineer certification of interruptible capability, moves to a commercial rate schedule, or contracts for optional firm delivery service. In this case, Cloverland did not fail the curtailment event in January. Rather, Cloverland failed 2 physical interruption tests. So from that point of the second failed physical interruption test on December 10, 2024, Cloverland accrued penalties until it provided a professional engineer certification on February 21st, 2025, in accordance with Section 3.5 of BGE's ISS tariff. Section 3.4b of BGE's ISS tariff outlines the waiver process for a customer that failed to interrupt its gas use when required. However, this waiver process only applies to customers penalized for failing to interrupt gas use and does not apply to customers penalized for failing 2 physical interruption tests. There is no provision in the tariff to waive a penalty associated with failing 2 physical interruption tests. Therefore, Cloverland is not eligible for a waiver, and Cloverland's request should be denied. Thank you, and I am available for questions.
Any questions for staff? So, let me ask. So they failed the test, but they actually, were they required to interrupt in this event that all the others have been?
Yes, they were also required to interrupt in January, and they were successful in interrupting.
And so, I guess I'm having problems figuring out why they failed the test, but actually when they had to show up, they showed up.
So the failed tests were before the interruption, and so after the second failed test, that was when the customer began all their repairs to come into compliance. And by the time of the interruption event in January, they were able to interrupt.
So because of the failed test, they did what they were supposed to do.
Eventually, that is correct.
Right. Yeah. And it's staff's contention that this is not so much a question of the merits, but more an issue that we can't grant the waiver because the law doesn't allow us to provide a waiver for failing the test. We only can provide a waiver for somebody who didn't participate in the event when they were called on for reasons.
That is correct. The tariff only provides an option for a waiver for a failed interruption test. I will note, engineering has possibly more comments on this, but the deficiencies in their backup system after even the second interruption test were rather severe, which could potentially, even if they were eligible under that first provision of actions taken prior to an interruption, their backup system was potentially in as bad enough place to prevent a waiver under that provision.
Okay. So, any other questions? So, is there anybody here from Cloverland?
Can I add something?
Okay, sure.
I was just going to say, the reason why there wasn't a waiver provision for these penalties is because, as staff noted, they can stop the penalties by taking action quickly. They can either, get a PE cert, from someone saying, hey, we have done what we have to do to get the systems up in place. Or they switch to firm if it's available, or they get this OFDS. That was the little amount that they could contract for. So, I think the thought was, hey, we're giving you the ability. We don't want to penalize you, but we want you to take action. So if you do something quickly, you get us what you need, then we'll cut it off. And that's what happened here. They did provide a PE cert, and so that's when the penalties stopped.
Commissioner Sussman.
Had they had interruption tests before these 2 tests, or were they a new interruptible service customer?
I don't believe they were. I'm 99% sure they were not new. They were.
So they would have had to have passed tests earlier?
We do tests every year, and so this was the test for 2024, the 2024-2025 winter. We do them shortly before the winter starts, and so they failed 2 in a row. We have a test in October. We get everybody a chance. Those people who don't pass the first test, we give, I don't know if we give 3-4 weeks. We say, hey, we're going to give you another chance to pass, try and get your things together. And so then we do a second test, and it's that at that point, if they don't pass the second test. So these are, it's not like it was a test from 3 years ago. This was the test for this winter season. They passed both of them, or they failed both of them that we
Right,
have.
but they had passed the test the year before, so, or presumably they would have passed the test.
Yeah.
And we don't know why the equipment failed, but something happened to the equipment and it failed.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, well, I move we deny Cloverland Farms Dairy's request for a waiver of the penalty imposed by Baltimore Gas and Electric Company. Commissioner Litton.
Aye.
Commissioner Sussman.
Well, I'm going to vote aye, but I'm really kind of disturbed that the company wasn't here in person to be able to defend their request. And that's one of the reasons why I'm voting aye.
Commissioner Barbe.
Aye.
I vote aye. Okay.
Right. Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, or I guess good afternoon at this point. On March 24th, 2025, Perry Point VA Medical Center filed a request for a waiver of the estimated annual distribution penalty of roughly $1.26 million and the commodity penalty of roughly $61,000 that Baltimore Gas and Electric Company imposed. On January 20th, 2025 at 10 a.m., Perry Point successfully stopped using natural gas and was operating 2 of its 4 boilers on fuel oil. However, starting at approximately 7:45 p.m., Perry Point began to experience boiler malfunctions, beginning with the shutdown of boiler 2 due to low steam pressure, followed by the failure of the oil flow meter of boiler 3. During this time, while Perry Point maintenance staff attempted to restore boiler function on fuel oil, they apparently lacked experience or knowledge to carry out procedures for restarting boiler 2 on oil after the steam pressure had dropped. After unsuccessful attempts to maintain operation of the 2 boilers that VA staff had originally intended to operate during the curtailment period, a 3rd boiler was activated. After operating briefly on fuel oil, boiler 1 was switched to operate on gas at approximately 4 p.m. on January 22, 2025, due to an incorrect perception it had a limitation on oil pumping capacity. Finally, Perry Point's 4th boiler was repaired on an emergency basis and successfully operated on fuel oil at the end of the curtailment period. Perry Point was non-compliant for 61 out of the 72 hours of the interruption event. Although Perry Point incorrectly assessed the cause of the shutdown of boiler 2, as well as boiler 1's capacity to burn oil, Perry Point did demonstrate good efforts to prepare for the interruption and took actions following the event to ensure compliance with future interruption directives. Due to these efforts and the seemingly difficult to foresee mechanical issues, staff recommends a reduction in the penalty fee. Between January 2024 and January 2025, Perry Point received an approximate 47.5% discount on its gas rates and paid roughly $366,000 in distribution revenue under Schedule IS as compared to roughly $698,000 it would have paid under Schedule C. With a 75% reduction in the distribution penalty, Perry Point's penalty fee will roughly match the amount they had saved over that 1-year period from January 2024 to January 2025. Staff believe this penalty amount balances the severity of the customer's actions without overly burdening the customer. Staff recommend that the Commission reject Perry Point's request to waive penalties for Perry Point's failure to fully curtail consumption during the gas distribution system interruption called by BGE on January 20th through 23rd. Staff recommends the Commission instead grant a 75% reduction in the distribution penalty, reducing the penalty to $315,655. Thank you, and we're available for any questions.
Okay, any questions for staff? Commissioner Barbe.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you base the 75% reduction on what they would have paid for a year, but how long have they been an IS customer?
I am not sure of that answer. I don't know if they would have an answer for
Are
you.
we reasonably assured that they've been an IS customer for more than a year?
Yes.
Then why did you choose a year?
That is the information that they provided with us, that BG and them provided. They only were able to provide the savings for that year, so we just based it off of trying to match their last year's savings being an IS customer.
Okay, I guess I'll have questions for the customer then. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Okay.
Oh, good afternoon, Chairman, Commissioners. I'm Paul James. I'm the Energy Manager for the Prairie Point VA Medical Center campus. Our situation is somewhat similar to Sinai Hospital in that our boiler plant is fully set up to run completely on oil or completely on gas, designed to curtail as needed, and so that we have on-site storage of alternate fuel should there be a gas line cut or something like that. And in order to represent our preparation for this and our good faith effort to curtail, monthly we test the boiler on oil, normally run on gas because it's cheaper, saves the taxpayer money. So monthly we test at least one boiler on oil, and in the week preceding we tested 2 boilers on oil to make sure that we were ready for this curtailment because we had an indication this was coming. We did completely curtail until about 7 o'clock on the first evening of the interruption period, at which time the main boiler failed. The next boiler was on standby. As they ramped that up, there was an additional malfunction, and the plant filled with smoke. The fire department came, and they couldn't run that boiler either. Very quickly after this realized failure, BGE was contacted to indicate what our situation was, and there was back and forth between BGE and our facility people from that time on. From that time on, we reduced as much as possible our dependence on gas, but we did not completely eliminate our use of gas during that period. There were certain measures considered, but the boiler operators considered it was too risky, that we might lose the hospital heating and hot water to fully go off gas. Following the interruption, there were measures taken to investigate these other measures, and as a follow-up to what did we do after the interruption, we ran at 45,000 pounds per hour, which is well more than load we've ever seen at the hospital. And so we have resolved the issues that we had during the interruption. However, we did not completely interrupt after that initial compliance.
Okay, questions for Prairie Point? Commissioner Sussman.
Okay, so having experienced this problem with the boiler, sort of moving forward, are you still committed to staying on an interruptible rate, or does it make more sense to move over to a firm rate?
Well, that would be a management decision.
So I'm talking about from your perspective, as somebody sort of responsible for keeping the campus sort of energized, for lack of a better term, and having those assurances that you're always going to have the ability to keep your system functioning. Does it make more sense to have a firm commitment to gas rather than having to go off gas and hope that the boiler is going to be able to function with oil?
Well, actually, our VA requirements require us to have a certain amount of on-site storage in case we would lose a gas line.
Right. Well, and that would be the case for any hospital.
Right. Yeah, the VA has some of their own rules, but yeah. I think the intent in the original design was to be interruptible, and I don't know if I could say anything specific has changed. So I would say we wanted to stay interruptible. We have backup of everything. We've got backup oil pumps. We have
except the backup didn't work. So in that sense, to make sure that you're that those in the VA have, heat, air conditioning, whatever it is that you need. It seems to me that to have those assurances, having firm access to gas would make more sense.
Could be, now, we're up in Cecil County, clear at the end of the line, of BGE's line. I don't know if they have capacity to serve a customer
Okay.
of our size. that
Okay, so
far.
you may, so Ms. Cora, they have to be on interruptible? Is that your understanding, or you?
I have no idea. We'd have to have them, provide us with data as to what their firm loads would be. We'd have to run engineering studies
Okay.
to see.
Okay,
We did ask the question of BGE in order to answer questions, but we haven't got that response yet.
okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Barbie.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. How many years have you been an IS customer?
I'm not sure. I've been there 11 years, and we've always been an IS customer. And the plant, the dual fuel plant, has been there for over 30 years, I believe. So I would guess we've been an IS customer for most of that time.
So you've been getting these discounts for quite a while.
Right.
Lovely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner, actually, let me.
So just to follow up, is this your first time appearing before us for a waiver of a penalty?
Yes.
Yes. So you've never sought a waiver of a penalty for an IS violation in the past?
I think we non-complied in 2014 with an interruption, but I think the tariff has changed since then, and I don't think there was a provision to waive the penalty, is my understanding.
Okay. So you,
We paid, this is our service chief, Bill
okay.
Mitzak.
So in 2014, you paid the penalty. You paid whatever. Okay. So that's the only time that you've been assessed a penalty for a violation of the tariff.
To my knowledge.
All right. Thank you.
What's that? So who would make the decision to move, if you could, move from interruptible to firm? Who within the organization makes that? I mean, is that at the facility, or is that a decision that's made at VA and DC?
Yeah, it's made way above our level in our.
Well, actually, and please identify yourself.
Yeah, good afternoon, Chair and Chairman. My name is Bill Mitzak. I'm Chief of Facilities and Engineering Services for WAMIX that include Perry Point, Baltimore, and Lochraven medical campuses. So that decision is being made. The way the VA is organized, we report to the VISNs. VISNs oversee multiple medical centers, and that decision would made even above the VISN on the level of central office of VA.
Okay.
And just for our defense, we do have a robust system in place. It just happens that it's failed. And I just want to let you know that we have a boiler project replacement in place. It's already under design, and in 2 years we will have 3 new boilers and 3 new upgraded systems. So we do not expect any issues in the future.
Okay.
Chair Hoover, can I just make a couple of comments just to tie this together? Staff does not doubt the good faith efforts of each of these 5 customers to comply. But as the commissioners have noted, things are going to happen. And with the best intentions, you folks are going to put in systems, but things will going to happen. And then next time we have a peak period, we'll be back here again. And everyone will have a very good story, and we don't doubt the good faith. But the fact is, this is an event that jeopardizes the system. We appreciate Ms. Cora's point that the utility will try to persuade a customer who says, I want to go interruptible. But, the utility is bound by its tariff. And the tariff right now does not exclude any types of customers, for example, where we can all take a step back and say it really makes no sense, for example, for a hospital. So the utility has very limited say there because they are bound by their tariff. It also bears noting that the savings are such that you could say the penalty is yeah, it's a penalty, but in a real sense, it's just offsetting a portion of the savings that you were getting for being able to interrupt, even though, but you didn't interrupt. So you're just giving up a portion of that. And the last point is, again, the point is made that doesn't happen often. But that's exactly the point. The whole point of being able to interrupt is that once every 4 or 5 year peak period, that's when we need you off the system. That's all.
But that being said, I mean, it is your recommendation that we waive essentially 3/4 of this penalty, right?
Yes, because the tariff talks about a good faith effort. Now, one might question whether that's the right standard, candidly, because with a good faith effort, I no doubt that people were acting in good faith here. But yeah, if you're suggesting that maybe that's the wrong standard or it should be a more strict standard, I understand where you're going with that. But we felt in staff that we were bound by that. More lax, show us you did what you thought you needed to do.
Okay, Commissioner Bartlett.
Well, let me return to this whole notion of doing the abatement of the fine based on a year's worth of discounts. I mean, we've just learned that they've been an IS customer for 11 years. I mean, why would we limit ourselves to 1 year? Why not 4 years or 5? I mean,
I appreciate that point. I can't say why we chose the 1 year. Because again, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Here we go.
Good afternoon, Commissioner Barvey, Drew McAuliffe again on behalf of staff. Yeah, so I understand your question. Again, with the tariff and the good faith effort that Mr. Albert was bringing up, we felt that reducing the penalty to about a year's worth of saving was an appropriate balance between, making sure the penalty was severe enough to dissuade customers from not interrupting, and also noting that they did take some efforts to interrupt. It wasn't just ignoring the order. They made some efforts. So we felt that the year was fair, but it is subjective. So I would agree with you.
Well, I mean, is this going to dissuade anybody? It feels to me like the cost of doing business. We get smacked every 11 years or so, and we get to get a discount for 10 years before we get hit.
Sure. No, that's a fair point. I can assure you, staff was. I'll just say personally, I in the past we've kind of given too many waivers, I would argue, in my opinion. So staff was more than happy to have customers pay these fines because, as I stated earlier, we take the interruptions very seriously, and it can obviously cause harm to the entire system. So yeah, it was just a subjective kind of way that staff tried to balance both sides. But obviously, if the commission feels it's a little light, that's
well, Mr. Chairman, I'll just say that I think an abatement like this basically sends a message that this is a price worth paying. That's just the cost of doing business.
I understand. Let me ask this question though. I mean, do you have a separate budget that handles utilities, or does this come out of the same pot that provides services to your customers?
There's one utility budget.
But I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, is this penalty going to impact the money you spend providing services to veterans?
On the big picture budget?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Definitely. We have a set budget for a year, and those money need to be offset from other services that we provide.
I see. Okay. All right. I move that we grant the 75% reduction in the penalty imposed for failure to fully curtail consumption during the gas distribution system interruption called by BG&E on January 20 to 2023, 2025. Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
Commissioner Sussman.
And I'm voting aye, but only based on your statement to us that this is the first time you're seeking a waiver of a penalty. And that is correct.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Barbe.
No.
I vote aye.
Mr. Chair, item number 11 is a request from Nex Grid LLC for approval of electric meters.
Good, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Michael Spiegelman on behalf of staff. This item concerns a request by Nex Grid LLC filed on March 27, 2025 for approval of the Arium Pro and IQ Pro solid-state electric meters manufactured by Nex Grid LLC for electric residential and commercial submetering application in Maryland. Public Utility Article Section 7-301A requires a person to gain commission authorization before use of gas or electric meter, and PUA Section 7-303D4 at 1 and at 2 state that all submeter equipment is subject to any regulations and standards adopted by the Commission for Accuracy Testing and Record Keeping of Gas or Electric Company meters. Commer 2025-0104A further requires that first, all submeters installed in compliance with these regulations be of a type and class to properly and accurately register electrical consumption. Second, the meter type and design shall meet the applicable provisions of the latest edition of American National Standard for Electric Meters, Code of Electric Metering, the ANSI C12 standards. And third, that any submeter installed for billing purposes be approved by the Commission. In the present filing, Nex Grid has provided documentation that these meters have been tested and confirmed to all applicable ANSI C12 standards for electric meters as required by Commer. In addition, Nex Grid, Aurum Pro and IQ Pro models electric meters are already deployed in North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and New Mexico. Therefore, staff recommends that the Commission approve Nex Grid's request to approve the Aurum Pro and IQ Pro meters manufactured by Nex Grid LLC for residential and commercial electric metering application. If approved, staff will update the list of approved devices located on the PSC website. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for staff? Seeing none?
Chair and Council, thank you for having me. My name is Costa Apostolakis. I'm the CEO for Nex Grid. I wasn't sure what to say. We basically, we've been in business for 16 years, and we support all meter manufacturers that are out there today. And about 4 years ago, we decided to make our own meter. This is the meter we're now getting approved. Since actually our filing, we're now deployed in 3 other utilities since we've submitted in Tennessee and also in Florida. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have on our meter.
Okay. Any questions? Commissioner Sushman.
Yeah, I mean, I can't, I'm a little bit of a tech geek. So, and I know everybody's hungry, but I can't help but, be, just curious about how, so you're in the business for 4 years manufacturing your own, but I mean, manufacturing your own meter. So how, can you talk a little bit about how your meter has sort of improved on the technology that was kind of already there?
Yeah, that's a great question. Since we've been supporting other meters, we've kind of seen the additional features we wanted to have. Our focus is more on safety and energy savings. So with that being said, the meter, I mean, we're in the constraints of the form and the UL standards and everything, but what we did do is mostly is on the software side. We've added more functionality inside the meter to like let the utilities know what's happening from a communications perspective.
Okay, and do you do like 15-minute data?
We actually go down to 1 minute data.
1 minute?
Yeah, and we pull 100 points of data from the meter.
Okay.
And we submit it back, and then we do data analytics for complete smart grid. In fact, our systems, to this point now, we're now focusing on Maryland with one specific utility, but we're providing a system that actually pays for itself, even to the point where a utility doesn't have to purchase the system up front. They can get the system at no upfront cost, and that the savings outweighs the monthly service cost with this meter. So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. That was very interesting.
One question to me, how do you pronounce the name of your meter?
It's called an iQ Pro, but it also is under the name of Orium Pro.
Orium, okay.
Two different markets.
With that, I move we grant the company's request to approve the Orium Pro and IQ Pro models, solid-state electric meters manufactured by Nex Grid for electric, residential, and commercial metering applications in Maryland. Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
Commissioner Sussman.
Aye.
Commissioner Barve.
Aye.
I vote aye.
And Mr. Chair, back to item number 2, which consists of tariff pages from Verizon Maryland LLC.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Cameron Walton again on behalf of staff. On May 1st, 2025, Verizon filed revised tariff pages to increase the business dial tone line and PBX trunks month-to-month rate and 24-month term plan rate. The month-to-month rate will increase by $2 from $35 to $37, and the 24-month term plan rate will increase by $2 from $23 to $25. These rate changes comply with the restrictions put in place on Basket 2 Business Basic Services and Verizon's alternative form of regulation. Staff recommends that the Commission accept the tariff for filing with the effective date of June 1st, 2025. Thank you, and I'm available for any questions.
Any questions for staff? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. For the record, my name is Doug Smith, Vice President, State Government Affairs for Verizon. We've reviewed the memoranda for staff, the analysis and their conclusions. We agree with everything, and we respectfully ask for your approval.
Okay, questions for Verizon. Commissioner Linton.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, Mr. Smith. I appreciate that you are here today, and I didn't have any questions regarding your tariff filing, but I did have a few questions related to a filing that the company made a few days ago in a different docket, but that's the PC 52 docket related to our supplier diversity program. As you know, the Commission for a long time has considered that to be an issue that crosses different individual topics that the Commission might address at a particular time. So if you're amenable to it and you have some insight, I did have a few questions about that. Specifically the filing that you made on, your company made on June 2nd. As you may know, the filing specifically stated that Verizon was withdrawing or canceling its participation in our supplier diversity MOU program. And while it was addressed to our interim director of telecommunications division, we obviously have received it here at the Commission. What the filing did not do was identify any reasons for why the company was withdrawing. And it also, and I guess I'll start with the first part, it didn't say anything about the report the company filed on April 1st of this year. It hasn't been made public yet. I guess it's fine for me to say it now. The executive secretary can nudge me if it's not appropriate to do it now, but we are having our supplier diversity hearing, our annual hearing, on July 8th of this year. I believe it'll be in this room. Verizon historically has participated in those proceedings, and I'd like to know if the company is going to participate on July 8th.
I'll take the last question first. We do not plan on participating in the July conference, solely because we have stepped away from the memoranda of understanding, and we have redirected our resources accordingly, immediately, to a small business development initiative that is not just going to impact Maryland in a great way, but actually all across the footprint for Verizon, where we're going to invest $5 billion over 5 years. It's a significant program, takes significant resources. So we have redirected those resources that typically would work on preparing for that conference into that small business development program.
Okay, so the filing that you made in April didn't reference the program that you just mentioned now, and neither did the filing that you made on June 2nd. As you know, Verizon is one of the founding companies for our supply diversity program. While the letter, the sentence letter that referenced the company's removal from the program mentioned the MOUs that were re-signed on the last year, 2024. Verizon originally participated in this program under Bell Atlantic, your original company name many years ago. So there's a bit of obviously a legacy history here, and it applies not just for Verizon but for all of the companies that are still participating in our program. While we calculate and we track categories related to gender, ethnicity, veteran status, nonprofit status, etc., the program has always been intended to promote the development of open and fair competitive transactions and procurement within the utility companies. That's always been its core purpose. Since you're not going to be here on July 8th, is the company still going to continue offering those kinds of initiatives for companies that are interested in doing business with Verizon?
Yes, one of the things that Verizon is very proud of is how we make available purchasing opportunities for businesses that have the scale, scope, and abilities to meet all the needs of our business, whether it be complex electronics all the way down to landscaping of our wire centers or telephone pole inventories. The key there is scale. We don't buy one or two telephone poles or one or two electronic boxes. We buy train loads and truckloads. So we're always looking for that balance where we can find the scale and scope of a supplier that has the supply chain issues resolved, has the financial backing to be able to meet the needs of the business, deliver on the needs of those business, has the capability and technology behind it to deliver those needs for the business. And it doesn't matter who it is or where they are. We're looking for the best and the brightest to bring into us our products and services.
So, as you know, the original MOU included a requirement that the utility companies propose a strategy over the course of the upcoming year for reaching out to and interacting with those types of companies. Companies that might not be part of your bid list today, but might be capable of providing those services. Historically, Verizon has done that through aligning itself and even supporting various nonprofit organizations that specialized in rounding up and training and supporting those types of organizations. Are you going to still do that going forward?
Yeah, in fact, the program I just mentioned, the Small Business Development Program, was just announced May 13th, so it's very ripe and new. However, the outline, as I understand it, is going to include a number of components, including networking opportunities, training opportunities, grants, all kinds of peer mentoring, in an effort to bolster that component of the economy, which is really taking a hit these days, and it's a real backbone of the economy, the small business portion. In that small business portion of our economy are businesses of all sizes, shapes. There's veteran-owned businesses, and we're going to continue those initiatives that you cited through the small business development programs. Again, just recently announced.
Okay, so as part of that announcement, what's the outreach been like? I mean, as your filing that you just made back in April noted, you had a 52% spend with the entities that we track here. I mean, that's a significant number, and many of those are Maryland-based businesses, small businesses, a couple of larger ones too that are more regional, but many of them hire local employees. They are local citizens, local supporters, and they're customers of Verizon. In addition to that, and I'm sure my colleague, Commissioner Barbe, can attest to this, there are many elected officials that have been very supportive of Verizon over the years and very supportive of your initiatives, and in some part, and I won't say exactly what percentage it would be, but certainly in some part due to the fact that you have been a participant in our supplier diversity program. to say it a different way, they've spoken on your behalf when you weren't in the room. So what's your outreach been like to them, to letting both those companies that you've already been doing business with, as well as those elected officials, advocacy organizations, and others know that and what it sounds like you're saying today is that you're replacing what you were doing before with this new initiative in May, that you announced in May?
It is a very new initiative, so I don't have a lot of outreach available just in the few weeks that we've rolled it out. One thing I do want to mention, though, is how important it is to understand that with all the contracts that we did award, that 50+%, those aren't 1 month contracts. Those are at least a year, sometimes multi-year contracts. And if those vendors deliver on the requirements of the contract, there's no reason to believe that we wouldn't continue to work with them. It's all about getting the best products and services from the best firms on a timely and consistent basis. So I wouldn't expect that to change, sir.
Okay. So just to be clear then, there wasn't a interpretation within the company, to your knowledge, that the program that we've been operating under for almost 30 years now, that Verizon helped found and supported all that time, there wasn't any raft of complaints from customers or elected officials or other entities. There wasn't some study or analysis done to show that there's been some harm or loss to the company as a result of your participation in it.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. I think it's important for Mr. Chairman and my colleagues. I'm not going to tie us up too much in this, and I appreciate, Mr. Smith, for your hanging in there with us for the whole day here today. I think it's important to make that last point very clear, that Verizon's choices here today are not necessarily due to a failure of what's been done for the last 30 years. That there's been many companies that have been supported and benefited from it, and so I was a little concerned about the notice that we received. It was one sentence, and it didn't provide that context, so that the other companies that have, quite frankly, have followed Verizon's lead in participating in this initiative and being very supportive of many Maryland-based companies and citizens, and they suddenly see you step away without the context as to the reasons why or what your next plans are. And so I'd hope that at least over the course of the next several days and weeks, if you're not going to be at our July 8th hearing, that you at least make it clear, both publicly and otherwise, that Verizon's, there's a lot of sensitivity regarding the language here, so I won't say you're still in the game, but I will still say that you are supportive of the small business community, not just in Maryland, but even nationally, because there are other entities out there that would have probably received letters similar to the one we received, and are probably looking forward to having a similar conversation. Whether they do or not, I don't know, but
Yeah, it is fair to state that there were no complaints.
Mm-hmm.
We did not act because of complaints. It was just time. We chose to move into a small business development mode. We're very excited about it. And to your point, we'll make sure that we communicate that. Again, it is very new.
Okay, I appreciate that. So in that case, then, if you could, to the extent you've developed that communication, if you could provide that information to the commission as well.
I can do that.
To our executive secretary. Our interim director of telecommunications is a capable person, but our executive secretary would be the better person to send that information to going
Understood.
forward. Thank you to my colleagues for indulging, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Sussman.
So actually, I just have sort of a little bit of a follow-up from Commissioner Linton's questions. And I guess I'm just sort of, if you can sort of better explain to me, I mean, it sounds like the new small business development program is essentially what you've been doing, but just honing it a little bit more towards the small business. Explain to me how this is different.
It's actually a significant expansion. Yes, we were always there for small businesses, and we would encourage small businesses. We would occasionally fund incubators to take small businesses to the next level of a medium or large business. And we've seen and had success there. This is a much bigger and bolder step for us when we're putting in $5 billion with a B into that initiative. With the training and the grants and the mentoring and the networking, it is a significant investment above and beyond where we were before.
Okay, so when you say above and beyond, so you're basically, it's your sense that you're kind of taking what you had already been doing and just sort of expanding it.
On steroids.
Okay, so since you're not getting rid of what you'd been doing, you're kind of expanding what you had been doing, then I guess I'm not clear about why you're abandoning your participation in a program that you've been part of for so many years. I guess I understand you'll be very busy in promoting this new program, but this is really just a day that we have set aside in July. I guess I'm not really understanding why you feel like you have to abandon participation in a program when you're telling us that the program is really just an expansion of what you had been doing.
As much of an expansion as it is a redirection as well into the small business focus exclusively. And to be clear, Verizon recognizes that there are federal DEI initiatives out there, executive orders, FCC guidance. We wanted to be compliant, and we chose to clarify our procedures and our policies such that we didn't abandon small businesses, the core of American economy, but we had to be sensitive to those DEI directives. So this is how we modified our program, made changes to our website, made changes to our training, and we are stepping away from the MOU, but we're investing in the small business in America.
Okay. Do you also sort of perceive some of your effort as kind of community engagement as well? So that it's not just small businesses, but it's small businesses within a community.
Well, what's
or
interesting,
the community that you're in.
What's interesting is that we have a component, a community relations component within Verizon, within each state, so such that we are always available to elected and appointed officials. We're out there to nonprofits, trying to be available and listen to all the things that are going on in the community, sensitive to where our employees live and work. So we've had that component on an ongoing basis.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. I guess I'll just say on behalf of the commission that we understand that, not only you have to deal with us, but you also deal with other regulatory entities that may have different attitudes about that. But we do feel that the effort that's been started initially with Commissioner Williams many, many years ago and has now been undertaken by Commissioner Linton is a important and worthwhile effort. And so we would like to see you continue to participate at least in the substance of what we're trying to do, even if you're doing it through a different sort of mechanism, because we do think that utilities providing economic opportunities for small companies of all sorts is an important thing. And so with that, I move that we accept the tariff revisions for filing with an effective date of June 1, 2025. Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
Commissioner Sushman.
Aye.
Commissioner Barbe.
Aye.
I vote